across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. 2 minutes past 6, I'm Mike Graham, and winter is still very much upon us, ladies and gentlemen. There's been snow overnight in quite a lot of the country, even in the south, believe it or not. London, they tried to get a bit of snow last night, didn't quite make it, but there's going to be rail disruption, there's going to be road disruption, of course, today. There may well be airline disruption as well, so keep an eye on all of that. We'll be bringing in the latest news as it comes in to us. We'll also be going across to California, where the wildfires are spreading even as we speak. Hollywood Hills now appears to be on fire. An awful lot of celebrities have had to flee their homes. There's all kinds of hell to pay because of the way that the Californian state has been running, because Gavin Newsom has starved Los Angeles County of money. They haven't got water in the hydrants, they haven't got enough firefighters, and FEMA, which is the Emergency Operations Unit of the American government, appears to have run out of money as well. So while all the lefty mayors talk about our hearts are breaking for you, that's really not what people want. What they want is you to stop the fires from spreading and burning down every single house in Los Angeles County. 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, closer to home, it's all about Keir Starmer again. Last night, they had the vote to decide whether or not to have an inquiry into the grooming gangs. As we predicted, the Labour government instructed all of their MPs not to vote for it, so therefore there will not be an inquiry, but we're not sure if they're going to reverse ferret on that and decide to change their minds. Meanwhile, of course, Labour's in chaos. On the front page of the Times this morning, it says that there was actually a Labour policy document drawn up in which it said that grooming gangs being used as a phrase was actually racist, and it should not be used as a phrase because it would encourage Islamophobia. And that's all you need to know about Labour's attitude to the people who are the grooming rapers of young children in this country. Meanwhile, as if that wasn't bad enough, the entire economy appears to be teetering on the brink. Prices are going to be going up by 4.5% in the coming weeks, and it looks as though Rachel Reeves's budget has caused an absolute run on the Treasury. And of course, the Treasury is now having to be rescued. The markets have been destroyed, according to the front pages of the papers this morning. Market turmoil sounds red alert for Chancellor, and the cost of borrowing climbs higher than it was during the Liz Truss crisis. Rachel Reeves may be forced to cut spending and raise taxes again. I'm sorry, Tom Slater's here with us. Tom, very good morning to you. You have to ask the question, does anybody in government actually know what they're doing? I think we know the answer, don't we? 0344 499 1000. If you want to get in touch, here's how you do it.
Morning, Mike. Dan from Norfolk here.
Morning, Mike. It's Simon from Devon.
Morning, Mike. Great show as normal.
Good morning, Mike. It's Shirley here in the very frosty Cotswolds.
Morning, Mike. It's James from Blackburn. The Labour Party, I love them. They're delicious, aren't they? I love it. Oh, God, it's brilliant. They're just a gift that keeps on giving.
It's like a comedy show, but you don't know where it's going to go and you don't know where it's going to end. And if you were driving a bus and it was called the Labour Party, I think you'd be right now just about to teeter over a cliff and crash down and burn into the basement of the beach down below. 0344 499 1000. Send us a voice note, send us a tweet and a text. We will bring you all the news you need and all the opinions you don't hear anywhere else. This is Morning Glory. So here we are, 6 minutes past 6. Tom Slater's here. Very good morning to you from Spiked Online. What on earth is going on in this country? I mean, is there anything that's running properly or well? I mean, last night was bad enough when we knew what was going to happen. We knew that Keir Starmer would call the three-line whip on his MPs and disgracefully refuse point blank to have any kind of investigation. We were saying yesterday they need to have some kind of investigation. If they want to go down the road of saying there's no point in having an inquiry, we've already had one, they still need to do something, don't they?
No, absolutely. And I think it was absolutely shameful and horrendous the way in which they handled all of this. I mean, we had last night, as part of this kind of suggestion that they might change tack at some point, Jess Phillips saying, well, if the survivors want an inquiry, then we'll have one. The survivors have already called for an inquiry. That's what sparked all of this in the first place, that and Oldham Council asking for one. So it just looks, regardless of what else they want to say about this, it just looks as if they're tin-eared to these concerns and would rather just kind of carry on as they were rather than look at the specific issue here. Because as we all know, this hasn't been dealt with, either in terms of justice in the past or actually making sure these gangs aren't continuing to operate in the present.
Well, they can't simply say, well, we've done an inquiry already, because the previous inquiry, as we said yesterday and the day before, the J inquiry, did not really focus on grooming gangs. It focused on child abuse in general, and I think out of something like several years of taking evidence, 2 weeks of evidence was taken on grooming gangs. Maggie Oliver made a statement with 2/3 of which was cut out. You know, Rotherham was mentioned once, Telford wasn't mentioned at all, you know, so there was no, you can't really say that they've done an investigation and a proper report on grooming gangs, because they haven't.
No, absolutely. I think the Labour Party and a lot of people in the kind of liberal great and good, they try to generalise this issue. They try and talk about grooming gangs, the rape gangs in the kind of context of sexual violence and paedophilia more broadly.
Because everybody's at it, effectively.
Yeah, and because it dilutes the controversy. The issue in the first place was the fact that, of course, there are going to be commonalities in terms of how these cases are treated. The specific thing here was because the perpetrators tend to be Pakistani Muslim, and some would argue because the victims tended to be white working class and poor girls who were not treated seriously by the police, that there was a specific issue of a blind spot, of cover-up, of sensitivities creeping in and so on. So to try and generalise it, as Labour likes to do, is a way of ignoring it.
Yeah, exactly is. And on the front page of the Times today, a story by Tom Witherow, the definition of Islamophobia adopted by the Labour Party put the phrase grooming gangs in inverted commas and suggested that using the term in relation to a Muslim was in fact racist, which tells you everything you need to know. The wording was established in a report by a group co-chaired by Wes Streeting, now the Health Secretary, obviously, and this is since March 2019. Labour adopted the definition and examples in a report which included a warning that Asian grooming gangs are a modern iteration of age-old stereotypes. The document listed those as sexual profligacy and paedophilia, or Islam and violence, concluding that they put Muslims at risk of hate crimes. So basically they've said, this is why we don't want to talk about grooming gangs, and that's now there in black and white Labour Party policy. Absolutely,
it's unbelievable, this. I mean, they're effectively saying that to talk about grooming gangs is racist. That is what got us into this mess in the first place, and this is obviously this all-party...
And how can they not see that?
I think it's one of those things where a lot of the times they sleepwalk into these things. This was part of the all-party parliamentary group on British Muslims. They came up with this definition of Islamophobia. They were suggesting that the government take it on board. It became very controversial. Labour just adopts it wholesale under Jeremy Corbyn without necessarily even thinking about it, and it leads them into a situation like this, where on the one hand they're saying we take grooming gangs seriously, on the other hand they're using a definition in their own policies that says to talk about it is racist. It's ridiculous.
I mean, and also looking back at what happened over the years, basically, Anne Cryer, the former Labour MP who raised concerns initially about white girls being attacked and raped by British Pakistani men, she was shouted down as a racist in various meetings that she held with Labour. Claims of racism were also levelled at in 2011, and also Sarah Champion, Labour MP who spoke up for Victor Rotherham, she was nominated for a charity's Islamophobe of the Year award in 2018. I mean, it beggars belief how the left has kind of completely not only ignored the problem, but actually demonised those people who were trying to point out that there was something going on.
No, absolutely, and that's why it's so galling to see so many people pretend that they always cared about this issue in the first place. Up until, you know, Sarah Champion was in Jeremy Corbyn's front bench. She was sacked because she spoke out about this particular issue. This was very recently that you had various people in writing newspaper columns and chattering about this in the media who treated anyone who talked about this issue plainly as basically a far-right individual. So for them to pretend
and clearly
that they care about it now...
that's what Keir Starmer still believes, because he said it only the other day, didn't he? That if you want to have an inquiry effectively, you are being sort of, at the very least, sympathetic to the far right. This is nonsensical.
It's absolutely nonsensical. It's outrageous. It's a real kind of libel against the people that he's aiming at, but also the victims who are being told that their own experience is basically a far-right trope and not real, in effect. And it's been incredible to watch them obsess over the way in which people are talking about this particular issue, who might be jumping on the bandwagon and whatever, rather than the issue itself. But that's been how they've handled this whole
Exactly
crisis.
Right. Let's have a look at some clips from yesterday. Kemi Badenoch was speaking before the vote last night about grooming gangs.
Let us have the truth. The Prime Minister cannot tell the House the full scale of the scandal. He doesn't want questions asked of Labour politicians who may be complicit. He won't listen to the victims. He won't listen to the victims who are calling for a national inquiry. He is making this all about a bill this afternoon. Later today, he will tell Labour MPs, including in Telford, Rochdale, Bristol, Derby, Aylesbury, Oldham, Bradford, Peterborough, Coventry, Middlesbrough, Newcastle, Ramsgate, tell all of these people to vote against a national inquiry into the gangs which have systematically gang raped children in their constituencies. This is one of the worst scandals in British history, Mr. Speaker.
And she's absolutely right. And interesting to watch Angela Rayner sitting there shaking her head, and, you know, she's been incredibly quiet about all of this. She has not said one word about Asian grooming gangs. She has not said one word about Pakistani men in her constituency, some of whom have been prosecuted and sent to jail for being involved in this kind of activity. She has not uttered a word on Twitter. Do you know, on social media, she hasn't said anything for 2 days, and that was a retweet of Keir Starmer saying, "My government is fighting for change." It's interesting. The biggest story of the week, of the month, practically, maybe of the year, Angela Rayner's got nothing to say, even though her constituency is involved.
It's incredible. I mean, this is a Labour Party that was demanding inquiries when Boris Johnson ate a bit of cake.
Yes.
And yet,
they've called for 10 different inquiries, by the way, in the last 4 or 5 years.
You know, they've usually called for about 4 or 5 inquiries before breakfast.
Yes.
I mean, and now on this is one of the greatest. It's horrendous. And also, and Kemi Badenoch raised this point, you can't help but think that a certain incentive behind them not wanting to get behind this inquiry is the fact that a lot of these councils were Labour-run.
Of course they were.
And, of course, there's going to be a lot of questions asked about why this happened under their watch, and whilst it might not be politicians, the front benches or even the back benches, it's going to raise questions more generally, and you can't help but feel that that's part of the mix here without wanting to sound cynical or conspiratorial.
There's absolutely no question that they don't want to go anywhere near this story. Keir Starmer's doing his level best to make it go away and to hope that it will go away. Can't stand the fact that Elon Musk is basically, you know, stoking the fires and the flames every single day. And thank goodness that he is, because if it wasn't for Elon Musk, we wouldn't even be talking about it.
And also, if Keir Starmer had any sense, and if he really did have people around him who are willing to upset the left where necessary, as is often talked about Morgan McSweeney and whatnot, you know, there would have been space for him to try and make an argument to say, you know, I was DPP, I did change the rules and the guidelines around sentencing.
Very latterly.
Very latterly, but nevertheless, he could try and construct an argument. The Tories didn't touch this for 14 years. Now is the point that we're really going to take this issue seriously. We're listening to the victims. The fact they didn't even try to do that rhetorically tells you how radioactive they see this topic still, even after all these years, all these investigations, the fact that it's been brought out into the light so many times, they still cannot digest this story, and that's one of the biggest problems.
They can't get their heads around how to deal with it because they're so frightened, and that to me is appalling, really, when you consider what they're supposed to be able to do running the country, but yet they can't face up to a relatively small collection of individuals in communities that they fear. And I don't know why they fear them, because in the end, surely the Labour government can exist without the Muslim vote. They don't have to pay pandering to individual kind of small, relatively minor groups of people in this country, do they? But, I mean, that seems to be how they believe they have to operate.
Also, what they worried about, you know, losing the child rapist vote. There's something actually quite offensive to the Muslim community in all of this, as if to say, if you take on the grooming gangs too vociferously, that you're going to upset the Muslim community. Is that really your argument? Is that really the anti-racist position?
And if that is the argument, then surely there's something very wrong with those communities.
Yeah, well, and also this is something that, you know, this is a very predominantly Pakistani Muslim. There's all sorts of research which suggests there's a very specific profile. People are working in the nighttime economy, in some cases coming from very specific parts of Pakistan, reportedly. The idea that going after this specific issue and this scourge, which is something which everyone knows is a horrendous problem, including British Muslims, will upset the British Muslim majority, shall we say, is absurd on the face of it, but they're still clinging to it.
The British Muslim majority they keep referring to as the good people of this country and the people that make Britain great. Oh, really? Well, why are you pandering to people who they supposedly don't like then? Doesn't make any sense. Here's what Dan Hodges says in the Mail today. What will it take before Keir Starmer finally gets it? Or for any of his MPs and ministers who are preparing to dutifully traipse through the lobbies to block a full public inquiry into the rape and abuse of thousands of working class girls? He's basically talking about how Starmer has got this so wrong. He says, I'm starting to wonder whether Starmer has even the most basic understanding of the nation he purports to lead. I was saying this yesterday. He clearly doesn't get Britain, because 95% of people in this country, certainly more or less 100% of the people that listen to this show and watch it, want there to be something done about this. They want there to be some kind of inquiry or investigation or judicial review, something that needs to bring to justice the people who deliberately and quite specifically blocked the prosecution of guilty people.
And the fact that he can't see that is incredible. I think he's really a typical, almost the high point of that kind of haughty Labour politician who really confuses the Guardian comment pages for public opinion, who has no sense of the mood of the country. And I think that's just being demonstrated to people once again, just how, aside from all the other things that are being levelled at them, just cut off from how everyone else is looking at this story and how they're looking at it. So wildly different. It's incredible.
Absolutely. And one of the strangest reports that came in from last night, because the list of MPs is now being circulated amongst many of the victims to see who voted for and who voted against this particular amendment. But Keir Starmer apparently abstained, so did some of his senior sort of cabinet colleagues, actually didn't vote at all. No, what's that all about?
I mean, it seems like they just provide themselves with a little bit of cover, but considering the fact that they're requiring the rest of their party, some of which are representing communities that have been hit by this evil, the fact that they were demanding that they vote against this, whereas some of their leading cabinet colleagues were allowed to abstain, is also going to raise questions about who, you know, they're putting them in the firing line, but not everyone else. Two-tier voting.
Yeah, here's the list of people who abstained. Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner, Rachel Reeves, David Lammy, Ed Miliband, Wes Streeting. Interesting. Coming up, we're going to talk a bit more about Rachel Reeves because she's on the front pages this morning. Front page of the Telegraph, probably the worst of all. Treasury steps in to halt market mayhem. It was a great budget, wasn't it? Keir Starmer still calls it that. He still talks about that. He still talks about how great a chancellor she is as well. We'll come back with more on Rachel Reeves after this.
Where is the line between opinion and fact? And that's where the whole waters have got muddied. The move comes as Zuckerberg and other tech execs seek to improve relations with the US president to come. Donald Trump, he takes office, of course, in January. Trump and the Republican allies have criticised Meta for its fact-checking policy, calling it censorship of right-wing voices. Well, I think you have to be honest about this and say, yes, there clearly were some censorship of right-wing voices.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:22 in the morning. We're here, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory every single weekday morning from 6 to 10. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here at 10, of course. Tom Slater's here from Spites Online. Tom, we're going to be looking at what's going on in the markets in a moment because they're in turmoil thanks to Rachel Reeves' budget, thanks to the debt that we've now saddled ourselves with, which is the highest I think it's ever been for very, very many a year. But also what's going on, we want to keep abreast of as well over in California. Some terrible scenes there where the fires are still raging.
Some quite salubrious parts of Los Angeles, but it's a reminder of just how terribly run that part of the world is.
It really is. Let's have a listen to the helicopter reporter who's talking about what he's seeing.
Mark, very concerning sight here in the Hollywood Hills. We're just west of Nichols Canyon, just north of Hollywood Boulevard, where a major fire has just sparked in the last 5 minutes. We were over the Pacific Palisades. We saw the glow coming from over the hill, and just in the last couple of minutes that it took us to get over here to Hollywood, this thing has exploded in size.
And I mean, that is a massive fire. I mean, I know that area quite well. Many people won't have been there, but I mean, it's such a widespread part of the world, you know, because everything is desert really effectively around where the city is, and that fire you can see there just raging has only just started 5 minutes before they filmed that. So I mean, there's no end in sight really. It's absolutely horrific.
No, absolutely horrific. And obviously there does
5 people now dead as well.
It's just so tragic. And also the fact that this is something which surely should have been seen coming. I understand that there was, you know, the sort of wind and the way in which that spread the fire and so on is particularly unusual, but at the same time, this happens almost every year in California. There are wildfires. There's always conversations about have they done enough to kind of clear the brush, clear the kindling, make sure the environment is managed in such a way that you don't allow for a kind of tinderbox to be set off. And yet, this has happened on such a catastrophic scale. You can't say that people couldn't have seen something like this coming at some point.
No, I know. It's absolutely awful, dreadful. Speaking of not seeing things coming, the Treasury step in to halt market mayhem, front page of the Daily Telegraph. They've been forced to intervene to stabilise financial markets amid growing concern over the effects of Rachel Reeves' budget and a surge in borrowing costs because the Treasury have had to sell off, I think this was yesterday, they had to sell off a whole load of new debt, auctioning £4.25 billion worth of new debt. Treasury's debt interest cost £10 billion more after the bond market sell-off, and the FTSE 250 slumped to an 8-month low. So it's catastrophic what's going on here, much worse than what happened under Liz Truss. And yet, the BBC remains relatively quiet about it. I was watching the BBC News just before we came in, they're reporting that Chinese inflation is down to 0.1%. I'm like, how about you do some reporting on the state of our finances and the state of the Treasury and the situation regarding what Labour has done to our economy? And they've trashed it.
And it's comparisons like this which are really going to do it for them. The fact that the cost of government borrowing is now higher than it was during the Truss crisis. The fact that you've had Rachel Reeves, who was saying we're not going to raise your taxes any further, that we can pledge that to you, may now be forced to either raise taxes again or to start cutting spending, which is something which is also going to be politically painful for her, both within and outside of a particular political party. I am flabbergasted that they didn't, again, see this coming because of the fact that the economic indicators were not good going into this particular period. It's been abundantly clear that the only people who think that budget was a success are Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, and even then, you do wonder if they actually believe it. I think even she's now beginning to realise that she's made a massive mistake. But let's remind ourselves of why it was such a great idea to appoint Rachel Reeves in the first place. Here's Keir Starmer.
It will also be the first budget delivered by a woman ever. That is a moment of pride. When Rachel Reeves stands up, she will be making history. And I can tell you, young women and girls across the country will be watching, they will look up, and they will notice.
So the fact that she's a woman is the most remarkable thing about Rachel Reeves. Apparently the fact that she has zero economic knowledge and completely lacks any kind of a sense about how to run an economy is less important.
Oh, it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, the idea that you should appoint someone to be Chancellor or any particular position on the basis of whether they're male, female, black, white. I mean, it's just absolutely
It's
absurd.
mad, but it's typical of the Labour, problem, isn't it? All they see everything as a label.
Yeah.
Everything is a racist, or it's a woman, or it's trans, or it's discriminatory. They can't just look at people and go, "There's a human being."
Yeah.
Maybe that's the best person for the job.
And this I hope it doesn't, but the economic outlook could get even worse. We could be plunged into a really serious crisis. Rachel Reeves could be forced to step down. They'd still say, well, she was the first female chance. People don't care about any of that stuff. We've already had female prime ministers, none of them from the Labour Party, incidentally. This is about, does this person have the right plan? Do they know how to manage the economy? Right. The reason Rachel Reeves has been proven terrible is not because she's a woman, it's because she's Rachel Reeves. But at the same time, the idea that you should appoint her on the basis of her immutable characteristics is absurd on the face of it.
Yeah.
But this is all this Labour Party have, is optics and virtue signalling. Yeah. Meanwhile, they ruin everything they touch.
And look at what we've done. I mean, this is one of the things that he keeps saying about the NHS. We pledged to get rid of the waiting times, and we bring those waiting times down. We are honouring that pledge. Well, a pledge doesn't mean anything unless you do it. Promising to do something isn't an achievement, and saying that you're now well on the road to promising to do it is also not achievement. I mean, the front page of the Eye this morning has got a panel of economists sends a warning to the Chancellor over the toxic combination of factors hitting the UK. Rachel Reeves faces a generational fiscal challenge, according to Ben Zaranko from the Institute for Fiscal Studies. She needed to get lucky on growth or interest rates or something, and it looks like she hasn't. So there's no growth. Interest rates are going to be staying high. People's mortgages are going to be going up. There's a piece in The Sun talking about prices going up, 4.5%. Food prices are going to go up. The return of punishing inflation will put another squeeze on Brits, with experts saying there's little hope of prices going anywhere but in the wrong direction. Even Greggs are going up, apparently. Greggs has already outraged customers by hiking its sausage rolls from £1.25 to £1.30. Coffee has risen 10p to £1.70. 2 years ago, its popular porky pastries were just £1. So that's basically a 25% increase. The
bad news keeps on coming. And this is something where, because of the whole Liz Truss budget blow-up, that effectively deactivated an attack line against Labour for a period of time. The idea that you cannot trust in the economy. You start to see in the opinion polls, people are actually starting to be warmer to the Labour Party on that question. The speed with which they've wiped out that advantage that they managed to take has been absolutely incredible. But as we've been talking about, how do we not see this coming? They say they had a laser-like focus on growth. Did anyone really believe this?
Well,
there was no policy.
Nobody now believes a word they say about anything, whether it be grooming gangs, whether it be stopping the boats, whether it be the economy. I mean, Julian Jessup, the economist at the IEA, has put out a tweet last night saying, "Is it possible that Rachel Reeves' first budget will also be her last?" I think it probably is. I don't think she's going to make it. And she came in, let's not forget, as the sort of the great new hope of Labour. She was going to be the first Labour leader. She was obviously going to be the person that would step in if Starmer, for some reason, decided to step down. That's all been forgotten about now. She has no chance of furthering her career in the Labour Party because she's completely ruined the country.
And it'd be one of those things where, obviously, the kind of trail of horrors that she's left in her very short tenure so far. But there'll be an unfortunate way in which the Labour Party will try and kind of just make it a scapegoat as well, because these are policies that Keir Starmer was signed up to. This is a budget that he's continuing to say was actually a really important
for working people.
For working people that we're delivering, and so on.
As if he thinks that'll convince everyone that it's true.
So even if they do get rid of her, and I agree with you, the prospects of that have risen very sharply over the course of the past 24 hours. It's not going to solve the problem. They've got no idea what they're doing.
They really don't, and that's quite worrying, it has to be said. Tom Slater's here, I'm Mike Graham. We've got much, much more to do, including the price of happiness. We can actually tell you exactly what that is. Also, why the NHS is now advising you, if you do have to go to the A&E department, please just go on your own. Don't take anybody with you, because it might get a bit too crowded for you. And also, we'll be showing you a picture, a remarkable picture, of a baby being born on a migrant boat on its way to Europe. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:34. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the home of common sense. It's the one place to come to find out all the news that you need and all the opinions that you will not hear anywhere else. We've been talking about Rachel Reeves this morning, the state of the economy. We've been talking as well about the state of Labour after last night's vote, in which they basically insulted the entire country by telling every single Labour MP to vote against the idea of an inquiry into the grooming gang scandal. Natasha says this morning, Mike, I didn't think this Labour government could morally sink any lower, but they have. For the cabinet members to abstain so they can claim in the future that they didn't vote against an inquiry, but force the rest to vote against it so that they still got the vote against through is morally reprehensible and disgusting. I think that's absolutely right. We've got a ridiculous amount of stories to talk about. Tom Slater's here from Spikes Online. Let's talk about what's on the front page of The Times this morning, Tom. Our old friend Sebastian Gorka, who's going back into the White House as a special advisor to the president with responsibility for counter-terrorism, believe it or not. He's apparently given an interview to The Times in which he's basically said that we should be taking back Britons who are in ISIS camps over in Syria. Quite a controversial view. I don't think he's right about this, actually. I speak to Sebastian on a fairly regular basis, but including Shamima Begum and various other teenagers and young people who went out to fight for ISIS. There's still quite a few abroad, aren't there, being held in these refugee camps?
No, absolutely. In the sort of northeast of Syria, where the Syrian Democratic Forces, the Kurdish forces, are basically holding them in these prisons. They reckon there's somewhere in the region of about 100 British citizens who are there, men, women and children. And of course, it's been such a vexed issue because of the Shamima Begum question and because of the fact that a big part of the reason that the previous government and the British state more broadly would much prefer it if those fighters stayed put is because they know that in terms of our own laws over here, it wouldn't be straightforward in terms of how do we actually lock them up for the horrendous crimes that they've committed, given the fact that they were committed thousands and thousands of miles away. And how do you prove what they did? I mean, that's part of the other problem with Shamima Begum. When she ever gives interviews and talks about what she was doing in that part of the world in the first place, she hasn't really ever admitted to doing anything wrong. You know, she's talked, loosely about losing her children, all of whom died. She's talked about being married. She's talked about having a life that she quite enjoyed and not really regretting anything she did. But she's never really addressed the allegations that she was helping her husband and various other ISIS fighters to kill people, to assassinate people, to sew them up in suicide vests and all this kind of stuff, But how do you prove it? No, that's exactly the problem, and that's why I know a lot of people previously been saying what you need to do is almost have like kind of Nuremberg-style trials in the particular region, but again in a situation in which you've now got Syria having undergone this recent tumult, new kind of government coming in. Is there really any kind of likely outcome of that actually taking place? But yeah, another hand grenade to the middle of this particular issue, which I think one of the big problems it does come down to is the fact that we do not have domestically laws to deal with people who have made this journey, who have gone and signed up to a foreign death cult that wants the destruction of not just our country but the West. When they come back, what can we get them for? Pledging allegiance to the Islamic State? I mean, it's one of those things we've never been able to deal with.
You can
and that's partly why they wanted to keep Shamima where she was.
I think you can prosecute people for joining terrorist organisations, but again, you'd have to be able to prove that they joined a terrorist organisation, and how do you do that? I mean, Sebastian Gorka has basically said to The Times, with regard to the special relationship between Britain and the US, and he says, any nation which wishes to be seen to be a serious ally and friend of the most powerful nation in the world should act in a fashion that reflects that serious commitment. So he says that is doubly so for the UK, which is a very special place in President Trump's heart. We would all wish to see the special relationship fully re-established. So, I mean, it's interesting because it could become, who knows? I mean, we've seen Donald Trump this week already talking about some of the intentions that he's got about, renaming the Gulf of Mexico, going after Greenland and the Panama Canal. I mean, he may well say to Keir Starmer, these are some conditions that I wish you to fulfil in order for us to have a tariff-free relationship on trade.
No, absolutely, and it's been clear that even with countries like Canada, which are amongst America's closest allies, he's willing to really kind of play his hand very firmly in terms of trying to get them what they want. A lot of this stuff might seem like empty threats, but it's a kind of opening gambit to try and get people to play ball with what he wants to take place. And it seems like he's going to potentially do that in relation to the UK in this particular situation.
Yeah, well, he's already having a massive impact on the world, isn't he? I mean, we've got Mark Zuckerberg already sort of taking the knee, if you like, to Donald Trump, going to Mar-a-Lago, promising $1 million for his inauguration fund, and suddenly getting rid of all the fact checkers, which, by the way, rather amusingly on the front page of The Guardian today, yesterday they said there was dismay about the fact that these fact checkers were disappearing. Now, we've now got a quote from Chai Onwurah MP, the Labour chair of the House of Commons Science and Technology Committee, saying that basically taking these censors away from Facebook is frightening. I mean, why is it frightening?
It's so ridiculous, all of this. I mean, it just shows you how politically motivated all of that fact-checking was in the first place. Especially because you had, these supposed geniuses saying that, a Carl Hennigan piece about masks during COVID was wrong, even though they're just some idiot on a computer who's a professor of evidence-based medicine. Meanwhile, if
some kind of geek in Silicon Valley.
Exactly. Oh, I know better than this man. It's ridiculous.
Well, I used to get incensed because we used to put up quite often my interviews with Peter Hitchens on Facebook, which were, regular interviews that we did every single week, quite often going into the nonsensical restrictions that people were having to be put up with. And they would put warnings on them, saying things like, some of this content may not be accurate or may not be factual. How dare you?
It's ridiculous, especially because these platforms were, in a sense, requiring misinformation, were compelling misinformation. Because, if you dared to suggest that someone in possession of XY chromosomes of bananas and plums was actually a male, then you could easily get deplatformed, as various people were. So this has always been politically motivated. This was never about just finding the truth. And the kind of model that Zuckerberg is moving towards, the one that X has of community notes, of users themselves being able to point out this is nonsense, works pretty well. Why not go for that? It's because it's not about wanting the truth to be out, it's because they just want to feel like these platforms are controlling the narrative in a way that they support.
Absolutely right. A lot this morning on not the grooming gangs, but the people trafficking gangs. Keir Starmer's written a piece for the Daily Mail. He's quite busy these days. He wrote a piece for The Sun the other day. Maybe he should take up a career in journalism. It might be more successful than the one that he's got at the moment. But he's basically saying we will put people smugglers out of business by hitting them where it hurts. His announcement today is that they're going to go after human traffickers, treating them like terrorists, cyber criminals and corrupt kleptocrats. He says that they're going to be able to seize property, freeze bank accounts, take assets of trafficking gangsters. To be honest, I'm quite surprised they haven't done this already. I would have thought this is something you should have done years ago, isn't it?
That was my first response, was you think they'd already have these powers to begin with. Then the other thing that sort of strikes you is this is not necessarily a case that there's, on your local high street, there's a little office where there's a people trafficking person. He's got his bank account down the road. And this is something that's been pointed out in a lot of the coverage. It's not entirely obvious that any of these financial measures will work because of the fact they're obviously usually based abroad. There's been a lot of reporting in recent days about this going all the way back to Iraq, people operating there, and that's the person who's being paid when someone gets in a dinghy and gives them thousands of pounds. So, as you say, it's good to have these powers. I'm sure they will come in useful, but the idea that this is single-handedly...
But you've got to catch the people first.
No, absolutely.
And you've got to track the money, and you've also, it's a bit like saying, well, obviously they won't be coming here anymore because we've made it illegal. Well, actually, no, they don't care that you've made it illegal because they're criminals. That's the point about being a criminal, is you don't obey the law. But everybody else has got this astonishing picture, which is in the pages of the Daily Mail 12 and 13 today, a picture of a baby actually being born in a dinghy. It's not a dinghy coming to the UK, it's actually a dinghy going to Lanzarote, I think. It was spotted on January the 6th, and the boat has come from what looks like North Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, in fact. The Coast Guard first spotted the vessel 97 miles from Lanzarote, and when the time rescue was caught up with it, the baby had been born about 10 minutes earlier. But it's quite a striking picture. I don't know if we can see it. Not yet, no, but we'll get it. There's a whole load of what looked like some very frightened people sitting on this dinghy, and this little tiny baby in the centre of the picture. Very, very bizarre picture altogether.
And it's a reminder as well that if we don't solve this broader problem, which obviously doesn't just afflict the UK, it's something that has been running sore for more than 10 years now. It's just the more and more you're going to have these really imperiled situations where you've got not only just adults but even newborns in such a perilous situation because we've allowed this to continue, we've allowed this to become an entire industry. nothing's been done to stop it. So, of course, it's a really striking image, but also it's a sort of reminder of how much people have taken their lives and their children's lives in their own hands.
And it also shows you, doesn't it, that if you really want to stop this, you have to go to the root of the problem, which is probably more likely to be North Africa than it is Calais, because, you know, Europe surely should get its act together and just say, look, we've got to stop people moving from North Africa across the Mediterranean into Western Europe, because that's where all the problems are.
Yeah, and also doing it in such a way that, for instance, the way the European Union have done it in recent decades has been horrendous, because they end up like just paying effectively militias to treat the people who are trying to get to the coast pretty horrifically. So there obviously needs to be a new way, but as you say, just making sure that these boats never set off in the first place, because regardless of how you feel about this issue, that is just putting human life at peril. The fact that people are relaxed about that is
particularly
really
the lefties who always said, oh, but they've got a perfect right to come here because they want a better life. Well, yeah, but they're also dying while doing it. And more people died, I think, last year than ever crossing the channel. Let's get a voice note from Steve on Keir Starmer.
Steve from Barnsley. Oh dear, Keir, on about all the young women and girls in the country looking at a woman doing the budget. No, they are too busy worried about these rape gangs that he's trying to cover up. What a wally.
A wally, I think, in fact, is a very, very good description. Mick says this, Mike, don't forget the woke Lib Dems who decided to abstain on the vote as well and stay silent, therefore covering all bases. One from Neil, he says, Mike, you have to wonder how those senior figures in the Treasury allowed Reeves to get away with that budget. Why wasn't there pushback? And if there was, then I think we need to know about it to give us some confidence. That's a good point as well, you know, because the Treasury were all over Liz Truss, weren't they? Yeah. And the OBR were all over it. Every single city kind of organisation, the Bank of England, all the stalwarts of our economy were completely dismissive of Liz Truss's budget and made her resign effectively, lost the will to live. And suddenly here we have Rachel Reeves, who's produced a much worse budget and is doing more damage to the economy, and yet they're all keeping their mouths shut.
It is a reminder that as much of a blow-up as the Liz Truss budget was, it kind of set this narrative, which is that you've got this thing called the economic orthodoxy, all the mandarins, all the civil servants, all the Treasury economists. They're geniuses, and if you just let them run the show, it'll be absolutely fine. And when Rachel Reeves came in, she was very much just willing to just capitulate to them. A lot of things, the winter fuel payment cut, for instance, something the Treasury and the mandarins want to do for a very long time. And not only are these people politically inept, obviously, they didn't see how that was going to blow up in the government's face, but also these are the people who've presided over an economy which has been going from one crisis to another for a very long time now. Of course, the way the Liz Truss budget panned out is the way the Liz Truss budget panned out, but the idea that any challenge to their orthodoxy is by definition bad is ridiculous when you look at their own track record. And the budgeting and the borrowing now in this country is being described as toxic, and that's how bad it's got. 6:46 coming up. We're going to hear from Steve Gutenberg over in California. He's one of the victims of this wildfire that's attacking absolutely all homes in certain parts of Los Angeles. Also, we'll tell you exactly what the price of happiness is, and we'll talk about 4-day weeks and why they don't work. This is Talk.
is really emblematic of the lack of seriousness, both in Britain's political class and its media class, that actually what people find really disagreeable is what Elon Musk says. Now, I agree with you, he's sort of overstepped the line, but come on. I can't remember, was it Lewis Goodall who said he's very dangerous or something?
Yeah.
Yes, the man who runs the world's largest private intercontinental ballistic missile program is dangerous because he says things on Twitter. No, we've got our priorities completely wrong, and it's what he says that matters. He's pointing out a failure of the British state to protect the most vulnerable people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:50. We're here all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course, and we'll take all of your messages on board. You can send us a WhatsApp voice note to 03444991000. You can text us to 87222. Here's one from Sharon. She says, I'm so glad that the MPs voted against another national inquiry for the grooming gangs. It's a waste of taxpayers' money, and we haven't got that money to waste. It is the best thing the Labour Party has done so far, says Sharon in Staffordshire. Well, depending on what they do next, it may be the best thing that they've done, provided they have some other kind of investigation, which I think is what a lot of people want. Let's get a voice note from Dave.
Morning, Mike. Great show, mate. I was listening to Petrioskis last night. They're gonna make the you can't say Asian grooming gangs. It's gonna be a racial slur. I just want to know what's your take on it, mate. Anyway, Dave from Southend. Thanks, mate. Bye bye.
Yeah, Dave, absolutely right. We talked about this story earlier. This is on the front page of the Times. Labour Party policy actually has a document in which it said that grooming gangs is a phrase which should not be used because it is Islamophobic. My view on that is absolutely utterly ridiculous, and it shows you exactly why the Labour government cannot take this issue seriously and cannot investigate it properly, because intrinsically in their hearts and in their heads they think it's racist to call people grooming gangs. It's ridiculous. But let's take a little move across to the west coast of California now, because Steve Guttenberg, you might remember him as an actor from many, many movies over the course of years. He lives out there. Here he is talking about the situation that he finds himself in. It is an extraordinary state of affairs. I mean, we showed you incredible footage yesterday of the inside of somebody's house, where the fire was just literally raging all around it. Let's talk about a couple of other stories before we leave. The Chagos Islands back in the news, page 2 of the Daily Mail. Britain apparently could hand over hundreds of millions of pounds up front to Mauritius in a £9 billion deal to surrender the Chagos Islands. I don't quite understand why we surrender the Chagos Islands and give them loads of money as well, to the tune of about £90 million a year.
And the way in which the desperation with which they're trying to push this through as well, because they know that there's a very good chance that as soon as Trump comes in, he's just going to effectively nix this deal.
Just reverse it, yeah.
And the desperation, how terribly this has been handled, and also the fact that all along this has gone against the wishes of the Chagos Islanders themselves. So you would think the Labour Party would be most keen.
And Mauritius don't want it now either, apparently.
I know, because they've had a lot of political.
They've had a change of government
recently, and therefore the whole thing on the ground has changed. So it's just even the things which the government might point to as decisions that needed to be taken and things that they can actually chalk up as progress that the government has made on various different fronts. All of it is unravelling kind of all at once. The budget, the Chagos Islands, this, that, the third. They're going to end up with very little to show for themselves.
Well, this is it, and this is why I keep continually saying, until I'm blue in the face, that this kind of pressure on any government cannot last. You know, the personal kind of turmoil that Keir Starmer will be going through, and I don't feel sorry for him, by the way, I don't make any mistakes about that, but, you know, you wake up every morning, it's a hard job to be Prime Minister. It was pretty hard when Rishi Sunak did it. It's even worse now for this guy, because nothing's going right. Not one thing is working for him. You can't point to anything since July that has been a success.
No, absolutely. And it's something which, because of the fact that there is this sort of divided opposition at the moment, that makes it it's kind of a bit of a stay of execution, I guess, but it's still what a tremendous,
Well, I mean, they're their own. I mean, funnily
it.
enough, somebody said this to me before they got in, that they will be their own opposition, and that's kind of how it's working out. But let's have a look at one of the other stories in the Mail. 1 in 6 staff at a council that controversially introduced a 4-day working week on full pay have taken second jobs on their day off. So what a brilliant idea this is. This South Cambridgeshire District Council started this scheme in 2023. They said basically employees can get paid the same money, just work a 4-day week. So on the 5th day, they've decided to get another job.
Oh, fair play to them. They've played that situation very, very well.
But I mean, this is public money we're talking about.
No, absolutely.
So they're getting paid to do 5 days' work in 4, which some might say they can do.
Yeah.
But if they're then taking another job, surely that means that they've got plenty of room left in the tank. So they should be working for their proper job.
Well, it's one of those things, isn't it, where it's like the public sector in particular. I'm sympathetic to the idea that, if you can really make sure that a business or a public sector or whatever is so incredibly efficient and whatnot, you don't necessarily need people working 5 days a week. The weekend is a relatively novel invention.
Yeah.
But at the same time, does anyone really think that these councils, that these public sector organisations are running perfectly, just humming along, really delivering for people? Of course they're not. So in the context of all of this is ridiculous. And the fact that it's just being now indicated that it's just become an opportunity to take on a bit of extra work.
Take a little bit of extra work on and make a bit more money,
People
basically.
are just going to be wondering, like, looking around and seeing bins not being collected, potholes not being filled. They're going to think they've been taken for a ride.
Exactly, and that's the problem. If you're not happy, by the way, we can tell you how much money it would take to make you happy. This is a piece in the Mail as well. According to a study commissioned by investment platform IG Invest, the genuine price of happiness to make people truly content is £4,428,000 quid. So more or less 4.5 million quid. So if you get 4.5 million, you'll be happy. I don't understand why if you got 2 million, you wouldn't be happy. Why is 2 million not going to make you happy?
They just still feel that kind of itch of maybe it will all disappear, but a little bit more. I love how specific this number is.
Yeah, that's really,
down to the pound.
Down to, 4,428,942 pounds.
41 wouldn't have done it.
No.
But
the other thing that's funny is that they've also done what would you do for certain, because people will say, what would you do? Would you go into, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here for 100,000 quid? No, is the answer to that. 27% of people felt money ultimately couldn't make you happy, but 52% said cash did make life less stressful. 41% said they would consider doing something silly or dangerous to get rich quick. Apparently, 7.3 million for people would make them cut off from their best friend. That's quite a lot of money, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sure I would find people that would do that for a lot less. Also, they'd be prepared to swim with a hungry great white shark for 6.4 million.
I mean, if people really thought this through, it's like when you kind of poll people and how many people think that they could win in a fight with a bear or something like that. I think people are maybe misjudging the risks involved.
To take part in a life or death Squid Game style reality show, they want 10.8 million.
Well, at least
you could actually die doing that.
Anything's worth it for.
Yeah, I mean, some people. I don't know. Anyway, we're pretty happy here at Morning Glory. We've got plenty to complain about. Doesn't mean we're not happy though. We'll be telling you more about what is going on in this country. We'll be taking your calls, of course, as well. Keep sending those voice notes in 0344 499 1000. Christina says, "Good day, Mike. I'm so ashamed of this government. Notice the coward Starmer abstained. Why did he do that? I'm ashamed and cross." As are an awful lot of people, I think, Christina. Tom Slater, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you again soon. This is Morning Glory. Loads more coming up after the news. Coming next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 2 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the home of common sense. It's a place where the nation comes to talk, and we will be talking a lot this morning about what is going on, not just around the world in California, where there's still a massive fire. James Hill coming up in this part of the show. He's political correspondent of The Spectator. The front pages this morning very much dominated by market turmoil as Rachel Reeves plunges the economy even further into the mire. Borrowing now reaching an all-time high. Red alert for Chancellor is what it says on the front page of the Daily Mail. Front page of the Telegraph, the Treasury has had to step in to calm market mayhem, basically, and things are now worse under Rachel Reeves than they were under Liz Truss. Meanwhile, the fallout still from the vote last night in Parliament, where Labour MPs were told that they had to vote down the possibility of a public inquiry into the grooming gangs. But believe it or not, Keir Starmer and several of his senior colleagues in the Cabinet decided to abstain so that they could say their hands were perfectly clean. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Let's get a voice note from Sean.
Morning, Mike. Sean from Grimsby here. So, good old Labour Party has literally let everybody down. Pensioners, farmers, WASPy women, students, businesses, working people, and now on top of all that, thousands of young girls who have been gang raped. Shame on them. Shame on them all.
Absolutely right, Sean. I could not agree with you more. Let's hear from Joe Biden, who's got some interesting things to say about the fires.
We got this notification yesterday that a home was about burned down. Today, there's a lady still standing. I'm not sure. But the good news is, I'm a great grandfather as of today. I have a granddaughter, 10 baby girl, a baby boy. So I remember this day for a lot longer.
So we're sorry that fire seems to be destroying the entire metropolitan area of Los Angeles. There were 6 Los Angeles fires. There were 5 people dead. But the good news is I'm a great-grandfather. For heaven's sake, thank goodness Donald Trump's coming in less than 2 weeks' time. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. As if we planned it that way. I think the problem with this Labour government is the general public are not Islamophobic, says Marco in Swindon. The problem is Keir Starmer and his shambles Labour government are all Englandophobic. I think that's very interesting. Kelly says this, morning, Mike, looking forward to a few hours of common sense listening to you. Can you find out if what I just seen on X is true, that Keir Starmer abstained? It is true, Kelly in Wakefield. Not only did Keir Starmer abstain, but so did a whole host of his cabinet colleagues, including Angela Rayner, including David Lammy, and including Wes Streeting and Rachel Reeves as well. Let's talk to James Hill, political correspondent at The Spectator. James, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Things go from bad to worse for Sir Keir Starmer and his gang of hapless, hopeless cabinet ministers. You know, the economy appears to be plunging into a downward spiral of debt, high interest rates and higher prices as well, and inflation. Meanwhile, the grooming gang saga continues. The vote last night was received, I can say, probably the most badly as I've ever seen a vote received by the general public. People can't quite believe that Labour are so intransigent on this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. On the grooming point, I think that it was clearly not a great day in Parliament. Both sides yelling shame at each other in the House of Commons at Prime Minister's questions. And then, of course, the vote was defeated by a massive majority because Labour has so many MPs in Parliament. Yeah. No great surprise there, but I think that it's going to be something that keeps on coming up. And you already see Tory attack ads making the point that they were the ones who voted against inquiry. And I think it'll come an election time will be used as a stick against them.
Right, but isn't it interesting as well that Starmer and a sort of handful of his cabinet colleagues decided to abstain?
Well, I mean, normally the Prime Minister has a terrible voting record, whoever's in charge, because they frankly have to be doing lots of other things, lots of meetings in the evening, sometimes summits, and we know Keir Starmer likes his summits, etc. And also there are stuff like, you know, he might have had a security briefing or some such. I don't know what his plans were last night. But, I mean, I'm not surprised from a political point of view that, as you say, that he was not there for the vote. Why would you want your hands on this? But that being said, it is worth pointing out that for most Prime Ministers, they will not be there for most votes most of the time.
No, indeed. But many people are seeing it as a way of him kind of being sort of gilding the lily down the road to say, well, I didn't actually vote to stop there being a public inquiry. I just ordered all my MPs to.
Yeah, I mean, I think there may be some within Labour who wonder if it could have been handled a bit better, and there'll probably be some who feel a bit aggrieved by how this whole process has played out over the past week. And of course, it's notable that the Lib Dems, those arch mercenaries in ideology and Southern votes, also all chose en masse as a block of 72 to abstain, and I think that shows that they're also thinking similar political considerations about not being seen to have voted down this inquiry.
Right. I mean, there are quite a few pieces in the papers this morning about the likelihood of Keir Starmer wobbling on this and the likelihood that Jess Phillips kind of hinted that it might well be possible for there to be an inquiry. Do you think they will wobble? Do you think there will eventually be some kind of investigation of some sort or other set up?
I think there could be potential in aspects, but I don't think it'll be a big sort of national inquiry stretching many years, as we've seen with the COVID inquiry, or we saw with the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. I mean, I was at the lobby briefing yesterday, and you know, Keir Starmer's spokesman just seems to be unable to really answer. They were sort of holding it open, but sort of not. And I think talking to people in government, the kind of sense is they don't want a full, big-blown one, but there could be kind of looking at further elements, reviewing it, and of course prosecutions. I think that's the key thing. There's a much greater willingness to pursue prosecutions than there is to open big, open questions about things that went on over the past 20 years.
Indeed. Meanwhile, over on the other side of the street, I suppose, in number 11, you've got Rachel Reeves in an awful lot of trouble financially. Front pages this morning suggesting that market turmoil is a red alert for the Chancellor. The Telegraph's got the Treasury stepping in to halt market mayhem. Toxic debt now apparently is what we are supposedly going to have to put up with. And she's off to China, I think, today, isn't she?
Yes, and I think that's going to be something that ages very badly, given we're now just 11 days from Donald Trump taking office. Well-known China skeptic has made a number of hawkish noises on China. So the question is, of course, why are we going to China? Well, frankly, the answer is to get more money. But I'm not sure the Chinese are that interested in us. If you look, for instance, I was chatting to some of the Foreign Office today about this, which is, you know, the Germans for many years have tried to get more investment. The French are trying to get more investment. They're much softer in China than we are. If they haven't had much money from all of that, what chances have we got? And the answer is very little. It comes at a time, as you say, Mike, when it's basically a very bad time for the Treasury ahead of March, April. Borrowing costs have gone up, expected to go up by 10 billion or so. That means spending cuts. And also, that's not talking about defence, because Trump wants more defence. He's talking about 5% of GDP. We're still on talking about a pathway to 3%.
Yes, and I mean the Mail, and I mean I know that this might be considered by some people, politically speaking, not to be a factor, but the Mail have got a picture of Rachel Reeves from Parliament yesterday, looking terribly drawn, looking terribly worn out, and looking incredibly, you know, sort of unhappy compared to the way she looked in July 2024. I mean, she does not look as if she's enjoying the job, which must have a terrible strain on her personally, apart from anything else.
I mean, it's an unchivalrous point, but it's a point I get made by Tory MPs all the time who look at Rachel Reeves in the comments and say, God, how much she's aged. Often the burdens of office do that to everyone. The question is, I think, that is it as easy as someone Labour would have liked to have thought? Yes, there were a few sort of low-hanging fruit you could do on terms like wind farms, etc., but it's been very difficult, I have to say. And I look ahead to the next 6 months, and really all the indicators are that it's going to be a very long, hard, difficult spring, and certainly not the growth she promised.
Well, certainly not. And also, The Sun have got a piece saying that the prices now are likely to go up, 4.5% predicted now for many items in the shops, and they point at Greggs as a bit of a bellwether for exactly how much people spend, and it looks as though in a year the cost of a sausage roll, I know this might be, you know, sort of a pound in your pocket type stuff, but the cost of a sausage roll has risen by 25%.
I mean, extraordinary. And food prices does, as we've seen in America with Joe Biden, really have an impact.
It matters, yeah.
Absolutely, because people care very much about that. And the other thing, of course, is that as well as the prices on the street, there's also the business behind that, and all the indicators coming out of the business, whether that's the CBI or the Federation of Small Businesses, are all warning about this and saying, you know, you've said previously, and of course you went to the CBI, Reeves, and said that she wasn't going to raise taxes. But I think there's a strong sense that there are going to have to be further tax hikes as well as spending cuts as well.
And that's the problem, isn't it? Because people start to worry, and I'm being asked this question now by people who are sending me tweets and messages, you know, it's all very well to talk about the economy crashing, but at what point does that then affect ordinary people? Say, for example, you know, do pensions get affected? Do pension funds suddenly find themselves making no money at all? Do they go into negative? And we've seen before sometimes that you can have practically no growth in pension funds at all, which of course affects people's payouts, it affects people's livelihoods, it affects their ability to enjoy their retirement.
Yes, and they're going to be another group, I think, affected by this. And, of course, it comes off the back of several policy decisions by the Labour government, most notably winter fuel, which I think is going to be not shown to be a great political move, given how it defines everything that came after. I spoke to one person from New Labour who said, you know, our first act in office was to give the Bank of England independence. Their first act in office was to take away winter fuel, and I think that shaped a lot of the framing that's coming out. And so the government may have less of a hearing on this than it would otherwise had it not taken away winter fuel.
Right. And one final scandal, as if there aren't enough in there to be getting along with, the latest from the Tulip Sadiq story is that journalists had asked about Mir Ahmad bin Qasim, a British-trained lawyer who was detained by the regime of anti-corruption minister's aunt Sheikh Hasina. It's now been confirmed, apparently, that this guy was visited by a death squad.
Yeah, charming name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very cheap. 20 or so apparently turned up to this poor man's house in Bangladesh and complained that he'd been talking, that he damaged the reputation of Bangladesh internationally from this rather unsavoury regime. And I think, I mean, the allegation is, you know, did Tulip Sadiq make them aware of what went on in terms of that Channel 4 interview that this man allegedly had been talking, and did she know what was going to happen, the ramifications? Now, of course, she may have just said, hey, this is what's happened, I've been interviewed about this, and then she has no responsibility for what subsequently happened. But it's deeply worrying, and I think every day there are increasing questions. We saw it in Parliament yesterday about the role of Tulip Sadiq, another one of Rachel Reeves' ministers in Parliament.
And she's, of course, referred herself now to the parliamentary watchdog, but it's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? You've got a situation where the person who's in charge at the Home Office of the corruption agenda is now being investigated for possible corruption, given that her family in Bangladesh and her auntie in Bangladesh has been sort of chased out of government.
Yes, and the point some within Labour are making is that, hang on a sec, you sort of took out and bulleted Louise Haigh, the Transport Secretary, within 24 hours of old allegations, which Keir Starmer had known about for years. Why is there, you know, if I can use the phrase, two-tier Keir on this? Right. Why does it seem that there seems to be a difference in standards? I mean, that's what a minority is saying. I think most will wait and see how the inquiry comes back, what the minister... But I would also point out that even the advisor, it was reported yesterday, will not be looking at some of the claims in Bangladesh about her being involved in an alleged corruption scandal about a power plant. So I think that even if the inquiry comes back, I mean, there may still be further questions and issues around the line. Given how this spans 2 continents and it's obviously very difficult and complex in ways, I think that this won't be the end of the matter.
No, it won't. She's a very good friend of his, apparently, and he accompanied her, in fact, to Bangladesh on a visit to said auntie when she was in charge, and he's also hosted her back here in Parliament when he was leader of the opposition. So, I mean, he's tied into this story in some ways, and maybe that's why, again, he's reluctant to push her under a bus.
And this is the question of judgment, isn't it? You know, we can all take out our enemies, but it's about how you judge your friends when they've done something wrong. And so that's the question, I think, that people will be looking at when it comes to the ministerial sack race later this year.
Yeah, absolutely right. James, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. James Hill, political correspondent from The Spectator there. How about this from David? He says, morning, Mike. Tom Slater just mentioned Nuremberg-style trials for those UK terrorists in Syria. I think that there would be widespread appetite for similar trials in the UK for the rape gang inquiries. And Dr. D says, morning, Mike. Would Starmer have voted against the inquiry if it was white grooming gangs raping Muslim girls? Well, I think we all know the answer to that. Let's get a voice note from Sam.
These grooming gangs, do you know what? This is part of a sort of plus 2 decade systemic, surreptitious change in our culture, which has been literally slowly persuaded by various small, loud groups, organisations, Stonewall. It's infected into government, then seeped down into College of Policing and all the others, which has basically created a level of fear from MPs down to chief police officers, right down to the front lines, where people are in fear of losing their livelihoods, their jobs, even though in their heart they know what they should do, but they're literally between a rock and a hard place. That does not excuse people ignoring what happened. There still needs to be consequences. However, it's part of a much bigger problem in society, and the line must be drawn here. No more, no further.
Sam, I think people would absolutely and utterly agree with everything you've just said. Incredible that it's been allowed to happen. Incredible that it's been allowed to happen for so long and for it to go on continually, even as we speak, that it's still a thing and that it hasn't been stopped. And yet, as you say, we've all been encouraged to turn a blind eye, to look the other way. In fact, on the front page of the Times this very morning, Labour views grooming gangs as a racist phrase. This is a document that was drawn up since 2019. Labour has basically adopted it. The definition and examples in the report, which includes a warning that Asian grooming gangs were a modern iteration of age-old stereotypes. They say that basically Muslims are at risk of hate crime if you use the phrase grooming gangs. They've said the wording was established in a report by a group co-chaired by Wes Streeting, who is now the Health Secretary. And so basically this is why Keir Starmer wants to get a proper definition of Islamophobia, so that you won't be able to say the words grooming gangs for fear of being prosecuted on some kind of race assault charge. It's absolutely ridiculous. Claims of racism have also been levelled at various MPs in the past. Anne Cryer, former Labour MP, who uncovered some of this stuff many, many moons ago. She also claims of racism were levelled at Andrew Norfolk, Times reporter who broke the story back in 2011. And Sarah Champion, the former Labour MP, who was, of course, she is still a Labour MP, actually, she was upgraded and she was removed from the front bench in Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet because she spoke up for the victims in Rotherham, and she was awarded Islamophobe of the Year in 2018 by her own party. That's what we're up against here, and that's why Labour and Keir Starmer do not want to discuss it, and that's why Labour and Keir Starmer don't want to have an investigation or another inquiry. It's got nothing to do with the fact that there's already been one. It's got everything to do with the fact that they don't want anybody pushing stones aside because they fear what they might find under them. It's that simple, isn't it? This is Talk.
You know, far too often we're seeing paedophiles get away without even a custodial sentence. And frankly, that sentence of whatever it was you said, 6 years.
He did 2.5.
Serving 2.5 is derisory. I have a daughter who's just turned 14. These are little people. They really are. And there is no way that what happened can be described as consensual. And time and again, the perpetrators of these evil crimes.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:23. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Here's one from Keith, who sent this in. Starmer vows to build 1.5 million new homes. Starmer vows to create millions of appointments. Starmer vows to lower energy bills. Starmer vows to look after pensioners. Starmer vows to not raise taxes. Starmer vows to make working people better off. All of those accompanied by thumbs down, because all of those things that he's promised have not come true. Is probably the most broken and promising government that we've ever seen. But let's take another trip across to the United States of America. We're going to talk to Jerry Edling, editor for KNX News Radio in Los Angeles. Just before we do that, let us have a look at what's been going on actually on the ground. Here's an LA News reporter on the state of the traffic.
LAPD, about 4 different cars just pulled up about 5 minutes ago to try to alleviate some of this gridlock coming down from the Hollywood Hills and from Runyon Canyon out into La Brea and on Franklin over to Highland, because the issue is right now, as people are evacuating, there's not enough room for all these cars to go. You see it behind me going up the street here. That's why we got a couple police officers really just trying to direct traffic to get them to come down the street.
And we heard Steve Guttenberg earlier on, the actor, saying that, you know, people need to stop parking their cars on streets and leaving them without the keys in. Has been speaking on the news. You just heard it before, saying that her hearts are breaking, their hearts are breaking, we're standing with you and all of that. She's taken a lot of criticism, though, because she wasn't even in Los Angeles when all these fires started. She came back and gave a press conference. And have a look at this for somebody who doesn't quite seem to understand the annoyance and the rage that people are feeling.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster? No apology for them? Do you think you should have been visiting Ghana while this was unfolding back home?
Just extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, we see some politicians doing some weird stuff in this country, but to stand there in the face of one of the biggest disasters that Los Angeles has ever seen and to have nothing to say to a reporter asking legitimate questions, quite remarkable. Let's talk to Jerry Edling and see what he makes of it all. Jerry, very good morning to you.
Thank you for having me.
Not at all. That's quite an extraordinary piece of a film that we just watched there. Karen Bass, the LA mayor, just having no words, really, and no response to questions which seem to be legitimate about what it is that the city's been doing and the state of the of play there.
Yeah. It's difficult to see at this point what's going to happen after the fires are over. I imagine there will be a lot of calls for accountability, and it's the worst possible optics. I hate to use that term, but the worst possible optics for Karen Bass to be located like 6,000 miles away when this ultimate catastrophe is breaking loose in Los Angeles and throughout Los Angeles County. There are currently 7 fires burning and tens of thousands of acres. So right now, of course, the focus is on getting the fire tamped down, and they won't be able to do that probably until some of the low pressure systems and moisture wash in from the ocean, and that's not supposed to happen for a couple of days.
Right. I was going to say, it doesn't look as though the fires are anywhere near going out, and if in fact, if anything, they're increasing in number, aren't they? Because we've seen a report as well earlier this morning from someone in the Hollywood Hills where a fire literally just started a few hours ago.
Yeah. It's been, well, the Santa Ana winds, which have been fueling this fire, have been relentless. I mean, I walked outside and I almost got toppled over a railing because it was a hurricane force gust.
Right.
And it's And so the terrain around here is mostly brush, very few trees, but a lot of brush on the hillsides. And when they get dry, it's just and you get a day like this, it would be extraordinary if there weren't a fire. But this, of course, is an extraordinary fire, and nothing like this has ever been seen in LA County.
No. And while obviously there are fires that take place on an annual basis, we often see them in Malibu, we often see them in other parts of the northern areas around Los Angeles. I mean, seemingly this time there's a lot of blame being placed at the feet of both local and sort of statewide officials, isn't there? They're saying that there wasn't enough water in the hydrants, that there wasn't enough money in the budget, the firefighting budgets were cut, that basically FEMA doesn't seem to have any money. I think Donald Trump's put a tweet out saying, you know, thanks to Joe Biden, basically I'm being left with a FEMA with absolutely nothing in it.
Well, Mr. Trump has been an ongoing critic of California's forestry system because, of course, he's been attacked as an opponent of global warming, or at least and because of that, he's fought back by saying, well, California isn't managing its forestry well, and that's the cause, not anything that's a global event.
Quite right. And one of the problems as well that I suppose you would have there is that once these fires take hold and once the winds are whipping them from one side of the hill to the other, there's not very much anybody can really do. I mean, what's it like where you are? I mean, can you see the fires? Can you smell them? Is the rest of the city kind of in a pall of smoke, if you like?
Yeah, pretty much smoke all over. There was a giant plume of smoke that it broke out, and I remember standing on the balcony and looking at that, and I couldn't see the flames, but I could see this very dark smoke drifting out to sea, and it was very formidable. And people here are not only fearful, but I mean fearful and more, because nothing like this has ever happened before, and they really don't know how to deal with it, even though on one level, I mean, California is just a cauldron for this type of fire, and we're all familiar with it. But this time it's really hit home because it's burning through a major metropolitan area, and that's unusual.
Yeah, and according to information I've got, Billy Crystal, Anthony Hopkins, John Goodman have already lost their homes. James Woods looks like he may have lost his home. He was saying as well on a tweet that I saw yesterday that insurance companies up to 4 months ago had already kind of pulled the insurance on a lot of these properties.
Yeah, that's true. And they managed to get that through and pass the California Insurance Commissioner. And the insurance companies just said, look, we're facing a crisis of our own financially, and we can't do it. And they showed the figures, and even liberal California was able to assent to that. Assent to their.
So what do these people do if they haven't got insurance and they have no home?
Yeah, that's, well, sometimes they get aid from FEMA, but sometimes not.
But FEMA doesn't have that kind of money, does it? I mean, they can't help out everybody.
Right. That's true. That's true. So some of them have insurance that's been grandfathered, and I think if you already have a policy, you're pretty much set. But to get a new policy is very difficult at this point. And earthquake insurance is going in kind of the same direction.
No.
So
it's starting to look like a pretty unfriendly place to live with the fires and the earthquakes and have no insurance. I mean, it's going to be a pretty difficult place to have a growing economy, isn't it? Because we're also hearing, I think, that the Oscar ceremonies are being postponed by the looks of things.
Well, if you look at the kind of the topography of Pacific Palisades and Malibu, they adjoin each other. And of course, both are very affluent areas and both have celebrity homes and that. But there's a little bit of a difference because Pacific Palisades has a lot of trees, and the fire has jumped from tree to tree. It actually jumped over a freeway. But Malibu has a lot of low brush, and it's really almost like living on kindling.
Yeah.
And I expect before this is all over, the fire is going to go way west, deeply into Malibu, which is exactly what the folks in Malibu don't need, because they had a fire 2 or 3 years ago, the Woolsey fire, that pretty much destroyed. I mean, people are still talking about it and still recovering from it in terms of reconstruction.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I remember that. It's an awful situation. Well, listen, hopefully the fires will be extinguished sooner rather than later, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. That, of course, is Jerry Edling, editor for KNX News Radio in Los Angeles. Good to talk to you. Donald J. Trump has posted this. As of this moment, Gavin Newscomb and his Los Angeles crew have contained exactly 0% of the fire. It is burning at levels that even surpassed last night. This is not government. I can't wait until January the 20th to get in. As we say, FEMA, which is the organisation which would otherwise probably compensate people for losing their homes, is out of money as well, because Joe Biden spent it all, basically. So that's not a good thing. Let's get a voice note from Daniel.
Hi, Mike. Daniel calling from Tel Aviv. And on the grooming gang story, where the hell are the feminists? I mean, where are they? Where's the Me Too? Like, nowhere to be seen. Radio silence from feminists everywhere. No outrage. Same we experienced with October 7th mass rapes is ridiculous. It's so pathetic just to see that if they cannot point the finger at a white male, or they don't have a story that fits with a woke narrative, they just won't comment.
Yeah, so true, Daniel. Thank you very much for making that point. It's absolutely right, and people have said this for weeks now. Where are the feminists? Where were the feminists? Why were the feminists so critical of anyone who stood up and mentioned rape gangs and talked about rape gangs and talked about Pakistani men preying on white women? Where are the feminists? I'll tell you where the feminists are. They're all in the Labour Party who have put words out which say basically you can't call them rape gangs, you can't call them grooming gangs because it's racist. And if you do that, you risk putting Muslims at risk of hate crime. Well, that's just really missing the point massively, isn't it? 0344 499 1000. This from Rose in Exeter. She says, "Morning, Mike. I heard last night that Sammy Woodhouse, who's one of the victims, has been warned by Yorkshire Police about the content she is posting online, content that is already in the public domain." Well, yeah, it seems the police haven't learned any lessons either. They're still trying to tell victims to shut up. Well, that's not happening anymore. Nobody's going to shut up anymore. And in fact, the people who are telling people to shut up might want to be very careful about what they do from this point on, because when the inquiry does come, when the investigation does come, they will be very much in the firing line. I promise you that. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:38. Prices are going up, the temperatures are going down. We're going to have more problems on the railways, on the roads today, and on the airports as well. More snow on the way. If you like that sort of thing, then I'm sure you'll be very happy about it. But a few schools have been shut down because, of course, health and safety would dictate that if you can't get to the school or if you can't walk along the pavement without falling over, they'll just have to shut it. One from Susie, who says, "Morning, Mike. A couple of days ago, I went to a baker's and bought 5 sausage rolls and 3 bottles of water, cost over £16. God help us with this dreadful fail of a government." I mean, that is ridiculous, isn't it? The amount of money that people are now paying for what used to be relatively cheap stuff. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day, just going for a cup of coffee, or maybe a cup of coffee and a pastry or something like that. You're not getting much change out of 10 quid. It's absolutely ludicrous. Incredible. Prices are going up another 4.5%, apparently. Rachel Reeves isn't doing anything to help because the borrowing of this nation has now reached epidemic proportions, and the Treasury have had to step in to calm the markets down. And why is nobody complaining about that in the way that they complained about Liz Truss? Why is nobody forcing Rachel Reeves out of her job? Instead, she's off to China, without David Lammy, by the way, who, of course, is the Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs. Apparently he doesn't go abroad anymore. He didn't go to Saudi Arabia with Keir Starmer. Didn't go to the UAE with him either. Rachel Reeves is going to China without him, I think. Because I think David Lammy's out and about this morning talking about stopping the boats because they've got a new policy. They're going after their bank accounts. It's great, isn't it? You can imagine them stopping the boats at Dover and going, "Excuse me, would you mind giving me your bank account details so I can freeze them?" No, I don't think I'll bother, actually. Or here's some fake bank account details because I'm a people smuggling trafficker and I don't actually have a proper bank account. You know, I do everything on Bitcoin and it's all somewhere in the ether. I mean, you know, some of the naivety around these people is quite extraordinary. Let's talk to Alex Wilson, a Reform UK's London Assembly member, the one and only. Alex, very good morning to you. Welcome.
Morning, Mike.
Good to talk to you. Nice to see you. Richard Tice and yourself have written to the Mayor of London. I'm going to not call him by the name he'd like to be known as. I call him Sadiq Khan. I don't put the other bit in front of it because I don't think he deserves it. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so it's good to be on the show again this morning. I wish, though, it was in happier circumstances. Unfortunately, the new year has only just begun.
Yeah.
And already we're suffering from further knife crime in London. We've had at least 5 major incidents involving stabbings, and of course 2 days ago, and this is the incident which has triggered what we've just done. Two days ago, a 14-year-old boy stabbed on the bus in broad daylight, and so Richard and I, we've written to the Mayor. We're asking for action because we've reached a stage where we simply cannot go on like this anymore. Something has to change. Real action is required, and that's why we're asking the Mayor to declare a public order emergency and to really ramp up a range of initiatives that would help get back on top of this. So we want to see a dramatic increase in stop and search, particularly in hotspot areas. We want to boost police presence, and we want weapon sweeps across key areas in the capital. It's only by taking real action and real steps that we can get on top of this crisis before it gets any worse. Otherwise, we'll be on course for yet another record year of knife crime in our capital city, and it's simply not good enough.
And death and murder and destruction as well, because the latest victim, 14-year-old Kellyanne Bokassa, was stabbed to death in broad daylight, 2:30 in the afternoon, on a bus in Woolwich in south-east London, basically in front of horrified passengers. His mother's been talking, basically saying, her name's Mary, saying that, you know, he was sort of captured by gang culture at a very young age, and so obviously he wanted to become a drill rapper. He had a name of Gripper on YouTube. He was due to appear at Bromley Magistrates Court as well after being charged with possession of a weapon in a public place. He was accused of bringing a machete into college in May. I mean, you know, it's not as if there isn't evidence that this stuff is going on.
Exactly. Yeah, we have a knife crime epidemic in London, and it's time that everybody involved in politics and government in London, whether that's from the Home Office down to local councils, and obviously in between the Mayor, the London Assembly, all of us need to do whatever we can to get on top of this issue, which is that's why Richard and I have written to the Mayor asking for urgent action now. No more talk. No more obfuscation. We've got to get on top of this problem. Otherwise, this year will be another record for knife crime, for murders, for death, for sadness. we've got to change the way our capital city is run.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, what I discovered as well when we were reporting on this story yesterday was that there was another knife incident in the same postcode, believe it or not, just down the road, I think, in Shooters Hill. Fortunately, in that case, the victim wasn't actually killed, but still, a victim was stabbed within 24 hours of this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I say there's already been at least 5 major incidents involving knives this year alone, and the year's only just begun.
Yeah, it is absolutely shocking, isn't it? I mean, do you expect, I don't know if you've ever written letters to Sadiq Khan before, do you expect to get an answer? Because he's sometimes quite high-handed about this kind of stuff.
Well, let's see. I mean, there are various ways that as Assembly members we can raise issues with him. We can do it through things like Mayor's Question Time. We can do it through social media. We can do it by writing to him. I know that all of us in London are very, very worried about this as the key issue for this year that we need to get on top of. So I'm hoping he will respond. If not, then I'll use other opportunities to raise these issues, and we'll keep talking about it. We've also got the budget process coming up, and I would like to try and see if there's a way that I can use that, perhaps through an amendment, to try and increase some extra funding for doing exactly this kind of work. Now, to do that, I'll need to work with members of other parties, so the invitation will be there to work with members of other parties. Watch this space. We'll be talking about that in the next few days. But certainly the purpose of this letter, which we released yesterday, was to get the Mayor's attention, because this issue has got everybody else's attention, and it's time for action.
Absolutely. You might also remind him that he got the rather ignominious honour this week of London becoming the slowest city in Europe for congestion.
Yeah, so I mean, on every level, his administration is failing. So crime, we've talked about obviously a lot, is out of control. Congestion, it's the slowest moving city, and it's harder than ever to get on the housing ladder. So, on all those real issues that matter to everyday, or to Londoners on an everyday basis, this administration is failing, and that's why we need to bring about some real change.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. Alex, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Alex Wilson, Reform UK's London Assembly member, taking on Sadiq Khan. Well done to you for trying that. I suspect Sadiq Khan won't have much to say to Reform, because he's another one. He's so arrogant inside of the Labour movement that he doesn't believe that anything he does is wrong. He certainly doesn't need to talk to anybody that disagrees with him, and he certainly doesn't need to answer to people. That's how these people think. Keir Starmer, you can tell by looking at him, has the same attitude. You could see him yesterday when he was being harangued and harassed by Kemi Badenoch, about the whole grooming gang scenario, while she pointed out that he didn't want to see any kind of inquiry, and she said why. You could see him wriggling in his seat as if, how dare you criticise me, how dare you talk about me as if I don't care. Well, it looks like you don't care, that's why, and prove that you care by actually doing something, as opposed to stopping anyone from doing anything. That's the real problem. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Sean from Grimsby says this: just a few weeks ago, the lefty media was in outrage, pulling their purple hair out about a bald white guy doing vulgar things while filming a cooking show. Now the same people, and nothing to see, hear, Keir, do absolutely nothing about the rape gangs. It's absolutely disgusting. It's a very good point. Let's get a voice note from Jay.
Morning, guys. Fantastic show as always. So 364 Labour MPs voted against it yesterday, the inquiry into the grooming gangs, and they've said no, it's not happening. If I was the leader of this country, I would demand it happens, whoever voted against it. I want to show the parents that I've got them at heart.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely right, Jay. And Nigel Farage has already said that Reform will order some kind of inquiry. It's not clear yet what they can do about that or how that would sort of manifest itself, but they absolutely do care about what goes on in these towns and in these cities and in these communities. Keir Starmer doesn't want to open that particular box of worms because, you know what? He's frightened of what he's going to find in the box, because there might be quite a few connections to Labour. That's what they don't like. 7:47, this is Talk.
well, they've been in office for about 6 months, haven't they, really? They've had 14 years to get ready for office. I mean, in fairness, I suppose in reality, they've had 3 or 4 years to develop current and meaningful plans for the future of the NHS. And I must say that I was surprised that they're going to take until the spring to develop a plan for the NHS, and then there's going to be a whole load of consultation and mucking about.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 10 minutes, it's 9 minutes actually to 8. Coming up later on in the show, we'll be talking to Peter Hitchens. We'll get his view on one of the stories on the front pages this morning of the Daily Telegraph, in which it says that David Davis MP, a veteran Tory MP, has basically told other colleagues that Lucy Letby must have a retrial. It'll be interesting to know what Peter Hitchens has to say about that. But, of course, David Davis has long been suspicious about the conviction and says that he believes it's most likely the NHS is responsible for those baby deaths at her hospital. But let's talk now to Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector, because we could talk, first of all, Mike, about that terrible stabbing death of a 14-year-old boy who appears to have been in the grip of gangs for more than 2 or 3 years already. But also we need to talk about Police Scotland, who are apparently saying that their force is at breaking point because mental health absences have soared by as much as 50%. Let's start with the gang culture. I mean, we hear a lot about gangs this week, grooming gangs, smuggling gangs coming from abroad, now just drug gangs, I suppose, drill gangs in parts of London, where a 14-year-old boy stabbed to death in broad daylight on a bus.
Isn't it? And I think the wickedness of the grooming gangs, rape gangs, I think what it's hopefully done is exposed in society the amount of covering up that goes on, the attempts to justify a sort of multicultural society when it isn't simply working. And what I found when I was a young PC, I did some work when I did a degree whilst I was working on black suspects and robbery, which is all part of the gang culture, which was published by the then Commissioner Sir Paul Condon. And then he's, of course, this was used against him, really. And, of course, he was accused of racism, etc., etc. And there could be no debate. And people stifle debate. And there's a real problem that young black men are being killed more than any other, usually by young black men. And there's all this talk of stop and search, being racist and everything. Everything's seen through the prism of racism. And the net result is that young black men die a lot because of that. And hopefully now we're going to have an honest debate in society and see that there are real problems in certain groups with certain types of crime, whether that's robbery and gang culture or grooming gangs or whatever else. Every different ethnicity has its own different crime problems. And it's about time that we were honest about this, open about this, and stopped hiding it. And that's what politicians have done.
Well, that's right. And we know from the story in the Times this morning that basically Labour has policy and has a policy document which was signed off by Wes Streeting, who's now the Health Secretary. The words grooming gangs themselves shouldn't actually be used because they're racist terms. And they've said, the risks basically creating hate speech and hate crimes against Muslims if you somehow tell the truth about what the grooming gangs are doing. And if you use those words, it's madness.
It's not only madness, it's absolutely frightening that they could use this Islamophobia accusation to silence people, to silence victims of rape, to silence those who speak against it. And it's really wicked. And I think the public will see what the MPs have done and voted against having this inquiry. Bearing in mind, this is the same Labour party that when Stephen Lawrence was subject to a really wicked and evil racist murder, he died, of course, terrible business. And he and the police were alleged to have failings. the Labour clamoured for a massive inquiry when one young man was killed. We have now thousands of girls who've been raped and possibly murdered, and there's been failings, and they are racist attacks on these girls, and the Labour Party have voted against an inquiry. I think it's just absolutely wicked what the MPs
It beggars belief, doesn't it? And I think it will come back to haunt them as well, because it seems as though quite a few of the senior Labour politicians, like David Lammy, like Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, Wes Streeting, and I think a couple of others as well, basically didn't vote. They abstained on the subject, so that presumably down the road they can say, oh, well, we didn't actually say we shouldn't have an inquiry. We were absolutely neutral on it. Well, you shouldn't be neutral on it, because we need to find out who was responsible for covering it up and for not prosecuting these men.
Absolutely, and I think the trouble is with democracy at the moment, because of the failings of the Tories, we've got this massive Labour majority that no one really wanted, and half of them really don't have to turn up, you know, so half of them can abstain and they can still win any vote. But I think the public will be aghast at what's happened here. There'll be, you know, the amount of public inquiries that are called for. As your voice message said, you know, when some bald chef on the TV touches some woman at the, you know, the bottom or whatever else, which of course is never right. But what we see in these northern towns and also places like Oxford and Telford is systematic abuse, and they want to stifle debate, and it's just evil.
It is really evil. Let's talk about the state of play inside of the police forces themselves, though, because a story from Police Scotland says number of sick days attributed to ill mental health issues has risen by over 50%. Incredible number, this. Staff have taken nearly 441,000 days off since 2019 due to psychological disorders, anxiety, stress and depression. Is police work now more depressing and anxiety-ridden than it was before?
I don't think it is. And there's two sides to this coin. One of it's real. We ask our emergency services to see things that most people never see.
Right.
So death in all its forms, you know, seeing people decapitated, murder victims, accident victims, seeing people burnt to death, all these horrible things. Me personally, I saw all these things and it didn't bother me. One thing that did bother me, I saw some child porn once and it really impacted on me. It's really, I just can't get it out of my head. It's evil and horrible.
Yeah.
And then one of my good friends, Pat O'Riordan, he was on the Grenfell inquiry as my super recogniser who was spotting where the victims had gone in and he committed suicide. So I know that it's real. You know, there are some people it really impacts on. However, you've got to look at how the police recruiting the right people. They're recruiting people who don't know they have to work nights or maybe occasionally have a scrap when they make an arrest. Some people, strange enough, don't want to be arrested. We've got reports of, like, mothers turning up at the police station, like Mrs. Pike off Dad's Army, and saying, it's time for my boy to come home now. So I would question whether the police are recruiting people who are robust enough. So when I joined, and I was at Hendon, a lot of the people were ex-servicemen. So you've been to Northern Ireland, and modern people have been to Iraq and Afghanistan. So you've seen some horrible things. And you're used to it. But if you're recruiting people who don't even know they have to work at the weekend or on Christmas Day, then you're going to get mental health issues, I would suggest.
Yes, I suppose so. I mean, surely there should be some kind of robustness test, shouldn't there, for anybody who wants to join the emergency services? I mean, if you're going to be an ambulance driver, you're going to see some people who are pretty ill. You know, you're going to be involved in picking people up off the road after a road traffic accident. You know, you're going to have to see things, as you say, which are going to be quite upsetting to a lot of people. I mean, I'm the same as you, you know, having done what I've done for so many years as a reporter. You know, I've seen some pretty ghastly things as well. And, you know, some people can handle it, some people can't. But you would think, would you not, if you're going to run an emergency service, have a proper test to make sure that the people you are hiring can handle it?
One of the big problems, Mark, has been like the lockdown, because you've got police officers and no doubt ambulance workers and firemen and whatever else recruited over Zoom. So no one's ever seen these people face to face, chatted to them, seen what they want. And also, we've got to look at, it's a reflection of society. Society is almost infantilized these days. You know, so at a time when, you know, when I joined the police, the idea that, you'd have to work nights and weekends and Christmas Day and have a fight with people, I didn't have to be told that by the sergeant. I well realised now in this society we live in, some people are going to have to be told this. And it's just, as I say, and all the time now, I just get the impression that, yes, there always is going to be mental health problems. But the thing thing is, the more we seem to talk about it, the more we get.
The more you seem to get, yeah, exactly right. Mike, we've got to run. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Coming up, we've got Peter Hitchens and much more besides. This is Morning Glory.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the Morning Glory. It's 2 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock when Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along. We've got 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory now, every single weekday morning from 6 a.m. All the way through until 10. Coming up in this hour, Peter Hitchens joins us, the columnist at the Daily Mail. He's got a piece in the paper today in which he says is issuing a warning to Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage. He says, steer clear of all those Trumpoids and Muskites. They're only pretending to like you. They just want to use you. We'll get his view on that. We'll also get his view on the story in the Telegraph this morning in which David Davis MP has called for a new trial, a retrial for Lucy Letby, something that Peter Hitchens has been asking for some time. According to David Davis, he's told Parliament basically he thinks the NHS is most likely responsible for the baby deaths at Lucy Letby's hospital. We'll get stuck into that. Plus, why do the Labour Party feel so ashamed of their own skin? And I say that using those words carefully because it seems to me that the Labour Party are ashamed of being white. They say that you should not use the words grooming gang because it would be considered racist. They've said in a policy document that was signed off effectively by Wes Streeting, who's now the Health Secretary, of course, that it's an age-old stereotype to call a grooming gang a grooming gang. We call them a rape gang as well in some cases here, but they say it will put Muslims at risk of hate crime if you use these age-old stereotypes that Muslim men like going around raping white women. Well, when you have a grooming gang that goes around raping white women and it happens to be Pakistani, then I think you have to call it what it is, don't you? 0344 499 1000. Last night, of course, Keir Starmer lauded it over his own party and drew a three-line whip and said that all Labour Party MPs must vote down an amendment that Kemi Badenoch had suggested that would supply yet another inquiry on the grooming gang's problem. Now, some people think another inquiry is a bad idea. It would waste public money. It wouldn't necessarily resolve anything, but certainly some kind of investigation needs to be done. I would favour a sort of police and judicial-led inquiry, which ends up with charges being put upon those people who helped to cover it all up. Surely that's the way to go. 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, in the land of Rachel Reeves, she's off to China, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, while the economy in this country appears to be going down the gurgler faster than you can say Greg's sausage roll. They've gone up 25% in the last year. Our borrowing is now being described as toxic, and it looks as though taxes might have to go up, and so will interest rates. So it's all looking pretty awful, quite frankly, for Labour right now. It's 5 minutes past 8. 0344 499 1000. Add to that the problem of knife crime. Here's a voice note from Matt.
Morning, Mike. It's Matt from Doncaster. Another sad day in this country. Just gets worse and worse than it. Sadiq Khan really needs to get a grip of this knife crime. London is now becoming a place where people just don't want to visit, and it is a wonderful, wonderful city.
It is a wonderful city, but it has become slightly more dangerous, quite a lot more dangerous than it used to be, I'd have to say. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Now, a couple of people have also responded to what I said earlier about the snow, because there will be more snow coming. There will be more ice coming, no doubt, down the pike. There will be roads that are slippery. There will be railways that aren't running. There will be planes that are cancelled. I've got this from Steve, who says, "Morning, Mike. I live near Huddersfield, and my son's secondary school has been closed all this week due to snow and ice. Health and safety issues, apparently. Absolute nightmare." Well, it's only just opened, hasn't it? I mean, this is the first week of school. For most parents, they've got their kids going back to school since Monday, and many schools have been closed when they don't need to be closed, do they? 0344 499 1000. Peter Hitchens is here. Just before we start talking to him, let's have a look at Kemi Badenoch from last night talking to Keir Starmer about grooming gangs.
Let us have the truth. The Prime Minister cannot tell the House the full scale of the scandal. He doesn't want questions asked of Labour politicians who may be complicit. He won't listen to the victims. He won't listen to the victims who are calling for a national inquiry. He is making this all about a bill this afternoon. Later today, he will tell Labour MPs, including in Telford, Rochdale, Bristol, Derby, Aylesbury, Oldham, Bradford, Peterborough, Coventry, Middlesbrough, Newcastle, Ramsgate, tell all of these people to vote against a national inquiry into the gangs which have systematically gang raped children in their constituencies. This is one of the worst scandals in British history, Mr. Speaker.
I don't think there's any doubt about that last sentence. This is one of the worst scandals in British history. Abstaining from that vote, of course, Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner, Rachel Reeves, David Lammy, Ed Miliband and Wes Streeting. I'm quite sure why. Let's talk to Peter Hitchens, columnist at the Mail, and see what's going on in his world. Peter, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. I mean, it's inevitable that we will move on from it, but we must ask you first off all about this grooming gang scandal. A lot of people saying that this is categorising Britain now in a pretty shameful light. I mean, I don't know how to explain it to people, really, as to how we managed to let this happen in this country and let it go on for so long that it's actually still going on.
Well, I think the explanation remains quite simple, and it was the one which was more or less uncovered by the brave journalists and whistleblower police officers, and amongst others, who exposed it in the first place. There was an extreme reluctance in local government and in the police to accept that this was going on out of a fear of being accused of racism. And generally this great miasma of political correctness which hangs over the country prevented action. My slight puzzlement is that I had thought that owing to the courageous actions of these people, we'd got over that. And that it still seems to me to be the proper response to it is that the police should now be pursuing, and the Crown Prosecution Service should now be prosecuting the people involved. And the best way of bringing this scandal to an end is for those people who behave in this disgusting way to be prosecuted and find their way, when found guilty, to prison. And I stick with that. I'm slightly puzzled as to why we have to go through it all again in the House of Commons with political parties, both the major political parties, it seems to be posturing without any particular signs of sincerity. I'm not, I have to say this, I'm not at all sure that another inquiry is going to make life that much harder for the perpetrators. And I'm not absolutely sure why it is we're discussing this, apart from the desire of certain American persons to intervene in our politics for reasons I don't fully understand.
Yes, I mean, it is kind of ironic that we are discussing it really as a result of Elon Musk, because, you know, these stories have been uncovered, they've been discussed, they've been written about, and we have had some cases where people have been sent to prison, so much so that some of them have now come out and haven't been deported, even though they should have been. But, you know...
Well, that's true.
Yeah, there is, I think...
That's shocking, but it again, will an inquiry make it more likely?
No, I'm beginning to think along the same lines. I think I'd rather see... I was saying this yesterday, a kind of almost a task force, if you like, if you want to call it that, rather than an inquiry, almost a sort of Elliot Ness-style investigative body, which is made up of judicial individuals and perhaps law enforcement individuals to go after those people who were involved in the cover-up.
Or maybe, I mean, again, I'm not sure what criminal offences have been committed here. You can't prosecute people for things which weren't criminal offences at the time. But it may be. I'm very sceptical about the purpose and existence of the National Crime Agency. It's constantly described as Britain's FBI in a country which doesn't have a federal system. But given the local pressures on this might be a case for the NCA to be unleashed on the perpetrators. I don't know. All I'm saying is that Elon Musk understands this country so well, he thinks that King Charles can dissolve Parliament.
Yes.
And I am slightly puzzled as to why we're dancing so much to his tune. It's a disgusting business, and people did terrible things and got away with them for years, and other people failed to act on them. But that's our business. It's not the business of somebody in California.
Right. But I guess the interesting part about all of that is that there are two strands to it this morning, because your piece in the Mail, which is fascinating, about how we must be careful of American interference, if you like, not because of interference being wrong, but just because of perhaps the motivation of those people. But also looking at the front page of the Times, we've got Sebastian Gorka, a man who I've interviewed many times on this show, who's about to become a close advisor to Donald Trump in the White House on counter-terrorism, saying that we should be taking back Britons who went out to the Middle East to join ISIS, because it's our responsibility for the kind of the fight against terrorism.
Well, I don't know. These things are bizarre. I am against interference in this country's affairs by people from other countries, just as I frequently have said to you how much I'm against our interfering in other people's business. Sovereign countries should be allowed to get on with their own affairs within some very, very narrow limits, and I certainly don't feel that Americans who know little of this country should be allowed to dominate our politics. But it just seems to me to be a sign of the weakness of both the major political parties that they've actually been compelled to dance in this way. So you have Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, doing things which ought to be done ages and ages ago because of a fuss made across the Atlantic. And the leader of the Conservative Party is similarly. So I don't think that reflects well on our politics, but also I do think that people who claim to be patriotic should be more concerned about the meddling in our internal affairs by people from another jurisdiction.
But is it not rather ironic for you to say that, given the amount of interference that we've been taking part in other countries, like, for example...
Well, not for me it isn't, because I've opposed that interference.
Yeah. No, of course, I know you have.
I stick with the same principle. It may be for other people, but for me, it's absolute consistency. I think that in almost all matters, countries should run themselves and they should stick to their own business and stop messing around. It's not as if we're so free of problems in this country that we have so little to do, that crime has been so successfully contained, that the rape of children has been prevented so much that we're free to use our power and our wealth to go and mess around in other people's countries all over the world. It's absolutely not the case. And it always strikes me as bizarre the contrast between our inability to run our own country, control our own shores, and our willingness to send task forces around the world to bomb other people.
Well, yes, indeed. But I suppose part of that is the so-called special relationship, and you talk about it in your piece about how, and I know I immediately felt recognition of the fact that, you know, in America they don't really understand the rest of the world. They don't really care about what you've got in your country. They don't really mind whether you turn up with a passport that they don't recognise, or, you know, some kind of visa or some kind of driving licence. But there is, of course, a connection through NATO. There is a connection through our sort of, you know, global international bodies that in the Times piece anyway, there's a kind of reference point to, because the suggestion is from Sebastian Gorka that, you know, if the special relationship is to be what it is, then Britain must have some responsibility vis-a-vis America's foreign policy.
Well, let's not have a special relationship then, because it seems to me to be very, very one-sided. If it exists at all, it consists in us being the fifth wheel in every American cart. I don't know what we get out of it. I searched for it when I lived in Washington, D.C. I could find no evidence that it exists. And I think British people in politics and the media should start recognising that our relationship with the United States is that between any other country. They are not our special friends. They don't love us particularly. They're not going to come to our aid in all circumstances. We should have an adult-friendly relationship with them, but it should be on the normal basis that, you know, other countries do deals with other countries, and not that they try and pretend that they are, as I say, they're special friends. An embarrassing phrase if ever there was one.
Yes, I think that's probably true. Let's talk about Lucy Letby, piece on the front page of the Telegraph this morning. David Davis, who I think has long had this view, he's now wanting to champion the case of Lucy Letby. You've been speaking about it, writing about it for a long time. He says, more than likely, I know you've never quite gone this far, he says more than likely the NHS is responsible for many of the baby deaths, possibly all of them at her hospital.
Well, and he has made some strong statements on this. As I say, I don't go so far because I don't think it's my business to do so. I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of the case, and I think that Sir David has, in fact, been working very hard on this in recent months, and has put in a lot of spade work, concentrated into a very powerful and concentrated speech, which is now available on Hansard. I've just tweeted the Hansard text for anybody to read. As is also the government's rather feeble response. But it's quite remarkable now what is on the record about this case. And the most striking thing, and the one which Sir David makes very plain in his speech, is how much the jury did not know. And the response of the justice system to the discovery that the jury didn't know these things has been to say, well, that's tough. The defence should have made these points during the trial. Well, that's a perfectly good judicial point, but it doesn't have much to do with natural justice. If somebody is in prison after a jury wasn't told the full facts about the case against her, then should that person be in prison, or should the case not be reopened? And his final point that if she isn't guilty, then she should be released in her 30s, not in her 50s, is, I think, understandable by anybody. If this woman is not guilty, then it is an absolute disgrace that she continues to be held. And therefore we must discover, to the total satisfaction of the judicial system, with all the evidence being presented, whether she is in fact guilty or not. And I think the fact that this has now reached Parliament is a sign that it's not going to go away. And I just do wish that the government bodies, particularly the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which is supposed to look into this, would actually take seriously the issue. If it is, and I'm not saying that it is, if it is a major miscarriage of justice, if she has been wrongly convicted, then there are very few more serious bits of business before us than to clear it up.
And this moment in time, I suppose, it appears that there isn't any, shall we say, encouragement coming from the judicial sort of mainstream. They don't really want to let this case be reheard. They seem to be very reluctant to do so. And which brings us back to the whole, grooming gangs thing. There seems to be in this country a reticence in general to unpick decisions that have been made because you can't challenge them, which seems to be wrong.
That's not unreasonable. If you had a judicial system or any kind of criminal justice system which was constantly changing its verdicts, it would lose public confidence. You have to be careful not to just overturn verdicts and say that you were wrong on simply because people make a fuss. It has to be done with great care and deliberation, and I'm in favour of that. And I can see why the judges are reluctant to overturn the verdicts of a jury, because jury verdicts are so important. I sympathise with all that. But that doesn't mean you can never do it, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't take it seriously when there's so much evidence now emerging in this case which suggests that something went seriously wrong. I think it just did, and I think the fact that it's now reached the House of Commons and has been raised there by a former cabinet minister of some experience and distinction must suggest to anybody who said this isn't some kind of conspiracy theory nutcase campaign. This is a real national problem which those who are responsible for justice in this country should be taking, I think, more seriously and more urgently than they are.
Sure. Peter, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Peter Hitchens, columnist at the Daily Mail this morning with his piece in the papers about beware of the Americans bearing gifts, I suppose, for want of a better phrase. He says Trumpoids and Muskites are only pretending to like you. They just want to use you. 0344 499 1000. Talking of America, lots of you have got things to say about the fire threats to California and to Los Angeles specifically. Francis from Wilton says this: the fires in Los Angeles have been exacerbated by poor tree and brush management with no clearance, or it might be arson rather than anything else that's going on. That's a piece of footage that we used yesterday that you can see from the inside of somebody's home looking outside. These people have got 2 dogs in the house, and it looks absolutely horrific as to how on earth they can get out. Good afternoon from Singapore, says Ermin. Wouldn't it be fabulous if Nigel Farage gets elected as the Mayor of London instead of the current one? I do not want to mention his name, never mind his new title. London would be safe again. We can all dream. Well, I think one of the things that puzzles an awful lot of people is how it is that Sadiq Khan keeps getting re-elected with all the problems London's got over congestion, over the ULEZ zone, over crime, over property, over tax, over all manner of things that he has not really lauded the city over well, and yet he keeps winning elections. He keeps getting on the bandwagon of winning 3 in a row now. Absolutely ridiculous. Let's get a voice note from Ian.
Morning, Mike. It's very cold this morning, -7 at the moment. Comments about Labour, Starmer, all the rest of them. Unfortunately, for the first time in about 4 years, I was subjected to the mainstream media this morning on the TV for about 5 minutes before I nearly threw up. So left-wing, so biased, so condescending and, what's the word, arrogant, just like this lot who are in charge. They don't listen, they don't want to listen, they don't give a monkeys. So they need to get a grip before they get kicked out, which is exactly where they need to go. Anyway, mate, have a good day. See you later.
Ian, absolutely, totally sympathise with what you just said. What on earth were you doing watching the old mainstream media? I presume you mean the BBC or Sky or something like that. Dreadful. Keep it tuned to Talk and Morning Glory. It's the only place you need to be, because we'll tell you everything that's going on. We'll give you some opinions you don't hear anywhere else, and we won't lead you down the garden path and not mention words just in case they might hurt your feelings or might hurt somebody else's feelings. You know, we are not the Labour Party, I can tell you that, and we're certainly not what you might regard as the liberal, lefty mainstream media. But we are the mainstream media after all. 0344 499 1000. G-Man says, good morning. Mike, surely there's a link between the rape gangs and knife crime, with the authorities not wanting to tackle either in fear of being called racist. Have a great day. Yeah, I think there's some truth to that as well. You know, there's always these people walking around the country saying, well, these are difficult situations. Well, they're not difficult, are they? Somebody breaks the law, you arrest them, you take them to court, you charge them, you find them guilty if they are, and you lock them up. I mean, that's the basic model, isn't it? But we don't do any of those things anymore, and that's why our streets are more dangerous, our children are in more danger, and people are not safe and don't feel it. It's as simple as that. 8:23.
If you aren't ready, that's your choice, my friend. I just wondered whether there was a response from you to that.
I wasn't aware of that, and I'm sad to see how it go. He and I have worked very closely over the, first of all, the London mayoral campaign and then the general election campaign. But he's taken a different stance on, I think, this Robinson issue. And so, in a sense, we just agree to disagree. And it's as simple as that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the Morning Glory. It's 8 to 26. Coming up, we've got much, much more to do. We're going to be speaking to Anne Widdicombe shortly. Stephen Barrett's here, a barrister. He's going to ask us about why it is that this government thinks that £90 million a year to give to Mauritius in order to take the Chagos Islands off our hands seems to be a pretty bad deal. I can't imagine why anybody would want to do that. Also, let's talk about the weather because the snow is coming and there's plenty of snow around already. Phil says this, school's closing because of ice and snow. I remember walking to school in the bad winter of 1963. These people haven't lived in tough times. And certainly, we used to have a lot more snow in the old days than we do now. And now, whenever there's any kind of snow, everything shuts down. Oh, my God, I had an inch of snow at Heathrow. Better shut the runway. Gatwick Airport was shut for days, wasn't it? Because there's some fog and a little bit of snow, a little dusting, a light dusting. Manchester Airport runway was shut, I think, for 3 days in a row over the last few days. For heaven's sake, get a grip, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk to Anne Widdicombe, former Home Office Minister, of course. Anne, very good morning to you.
Morning to you.
So, here we are, once again, with the Labour government crashing the economy. It's taking me back to the days of old, when Labour didn't used to have very much of a clue about economics. They've been having a go at Liz Truss for so long now that they've now actually made things worse.
Well, indeed. I mean, Labour never did have any reputation for economic competence until Blair came along and more or less adopted the Tory approach.
Yeah.
The Labour approach just doesn't work, never has worked. The idea that you can tax your way out of a problem when all you do is produce disincentives. I mean, you know, it isn't exactly advanced economics to work out, but if you raise costs for employers, you cause unemployment. I mean, that is not difficult to work out.
No, it doesn't seem to be, does it? And yet here we are. And they seem to sort of move from one crisis to another because, I mean, not only did we get the story last night of them blocking this national inquiry into grooming gangs, but we awake this morning and that's not even the front page story in most newspapers because it's now moved on to the economy. But let's look back at what happened yesterday because Keir Starmer and several senior members of the cabinet decided to abstain in the vote, even though he ordered every single one of his MPs on the Labour side to vote against the Kemi Badenoch amendment.
Well, it was extraordinary. I think there were very good arguments in both directions. We did hear them in the Commons yesterday, but it was an extraordinary business. You know, if every single Labour MP has got to vote against something of that order of magnitude, then you expect that to be followed through.
Well, I suppose so. But how is it possible for the leadership to get away with abstaining then?
Well, the leadership can get away with anything. Just because it is the leadership, just because it has got a ginormous majority in the Commons, it can A, force anything through that it wants, B, is absolutely unsackable because it will never lose a vote of no confidence in the Commons. And I'm afraid, you know, even if the Labour Party were to rise and revolt about it, they can't change their leader just like that.
No, they can't. And so are you one of those who thinks a national inquiry would probably be unnecessary or too expensive or wouldn't make any difference?
I think on balance, had I been in the Commons yesterday, on balance, I would probably have voted for a national inquiry because I think there are an awful lot of questions, and the J inquiry was just slightly limited. On the whole, and I understand why you're asking me this, on the whole, I do not like public inquiries. They're a means of kicking something into the long grass.
Yeah.
But in fact, that didn't need to apply in this case. What Peter Hitchens said about get on prosecuting, doing the rest of it, you can do that anyway. What the Labour Party tried to say is, well, it will hold up all the rest of the children's film. No need for that either. You could have had a public inquiry. But as I say, to me, the argument was very, very finely balanced and certainly had nothing to do with Elon Musk, who bluntly doesn't know what he's talking about.
No, I mean, I think we can give Elon Musk credit for raising the issue, because I think if it wasn't for Elon Musk, we wouldn't really be talking about it in the way that we are. But you're right, you know, he has made some, what you might call glaring errors, and I think he did Nigel Farage a massive favour by then being critical of Nigel Farage and calling for him to step down, because it gave Nigel Farage the opportunity to say, well, we don't have to defend everything that Elon Musk says.
Yes, and not only that, but of course his big falling out with Nigel came over Tommy Robinson.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, pretty well everybody, not quite everybody, but pretty well everybody, would be on Nigel's side over this and would say, no, you know, this man must not be anywhere near power.
Yeah. But let's talk about the possibility of an inquiry, because I've become more convinced now that it's perhaps not an inquiry that's required, but it's something slightly more forensic, something slightly more kind of laser focused, if you like, if you forgive the jargon, because it seems as though we sort of know what we're looking for. We know that we need to find out who covered up this stuff and why it was covered up. We know that you know, there are members of the police involved. We know that there are councillors involved. We know that there are very possibly other, you know, well-known individuals involved, as well as the gangs themselves. And so surely what we need is a kind of, I've said, a kind of Elliot Ness style task force almost, which would be made up perhaps of members of the judiciary, members of sort of senior police officers or something, to go after those people, because I think we know who most of them are, don't we?
Well, I think, yes. I mean, there is an argument for saying it isn't enough just to say there was a cover-up. We do need to take specific action. But I think the point about a public inquiry is that you're asking a bit more than who. You're asking why, what were the root causes of the cover-up? Was it a fear of being accused of racism? Was it something else? Was it incompetence? What was it? And I think, as I say, on balance, I mean, I'm not waving flags on this one, but on balance, I think an inquiry might finally clear up those answers.
Well, I don't know if you've seen the story on the front page of the Times this morning, but the Labour Party, in their quest to find a definition of Islamophobia, apparently put grooming gangs as a phrase in inverted commas on a policy paper, and said that the use of that term is racist. Not potentially racist, not possibly racist, but actually racist. And they said that it contributes to hate crimes against Muslims if you use that phrase, which tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it?
Well, it's complete rot. I mean, grooming gang is a statement of fact.
Right.
It's a gang that grooms. That's a statement of fact. And, you know, it could be a white gang, a black gang, an Asian gang. It could be in any sort of gang. But it's a grooming gang, and it cannot be racist in its own right, that term. Can't be.
No, exactly. But what I'm saying is that if that's the kind of language that they are trying to stop using, then it tells you why perhaps they're not as good and thorough as they ought to have been at investigating such things.
Well, I mean, I don't think you can blame, you know, the Labour Party for the quality of the investigation. But I think what you can blame them for is the creation of what is now called woke. But the creation of this idea that language alone can determine, you know, whole societal attitudes. And it is a nonsense. And as I say, you know, you have a statement about a grooming gang. That's a statement of fact.
Yeah, absolutely right. And good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Anne Widdecombe, former Home Office Minister, on the news from last night that Labour have blocked, effectively, any national inquiry into grooming gangs. There was a suggestion at one point yesterday that Keir Starmer might be wobbling a bit on it, that Jess Phillips might be interested in possibly having some kind of inquiry if the victims asked for it, which they already have, of course. But, you know, let's get a voice note from Kieran.
Hello, Mike. Kieran from Luton here. First-time voice note leaver, but long-time listener of the show. I'm leaving this note today because I'm absolutely incensed about these spineless MPs, these Labour MPs who all voted against the amendments to the bill last night and voted against protecting young girls. As a father of a daughter myself, who lives in one of the worst affected parts of the country, I'm just fuming about this. I just think, you know, how I would feel if this had happened to her and how I'd want people to protect her. And I think the only answer here is that anyone who has an MP who voted against the amendments and was complicit in these awful rape gangs, people need to start putting forward recall petitions for all these MPs and get them out.
I think, Kieran, you've got a very good point, and thank you for being a first-time voice noter. You can do it as well, of course, 03444991000. Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to get a list. In fact, I tweeted one out earlier on last night because there is an easily available list of people who, MPs who did vote as they were instructed to by Keir Starmer from the Labour Party whip's office. And if your particular MP voted in favour of not allowing for any kind of inquiry, then you can, by all means, ask to have them recalled. You can say that you're not happy about it. You can send them emails. You can be in communication with them. Absolutely, is what you should do. Sean in Bridlington says this: it's so cold this morning that I've actually seen a cyclist riding on the road instead of the pavement. If it gets any colder, socialists will be putting their hands in their own pockets for a change. Indeed. And Mike from Lincoln says, morning, Mike. I see Liz Truss's lawyers have issued a cease and desist order on two-tier Keir to stop him saying that Liz Truss crashed the economy. Absolutely right. We'll be looking into that one because Liz Truss, I think, is sick to the back teeth of being told that she ruined our economy when it looks as though Rachel Reeves is now doing far worse damage over a longer period of time without getting anything like the vitriol that Liz Truss got. I wonder why that is. Oh, yeah. It's because she's a lefty, isn't it? She's off to China, by the way, today. Good luck. Maybe they could keep her and hang on to her and ruin the Chinese economy, and then we'd all be better off, wouldn't we? I think I've just come up with a genius idea. Make Rachel Reeves the Chancellor of the Exchequer in China. There you go. 8:37.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:40. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here. The sun is up. It's looking, I don't know, a bit hazy out there across the skyline of London. There's quite a lot of snow fell south of London, down in Sussex yesterday. Quite a lot of snow falling north of London as well. Hertfordshire was getting some, and, of course, all the way up to Manchester, which was white, all the way up to Scotland, where it's going to be minus 15, apparently, later on in the week. So pensioners are going to be very, very cold indeed if they can't afford to put on their fuel in the house just because of the winter fuel allowance being taken away from them. Let's get a voice note from Lee.
In relation to the MPs voting down the inquiry, it's not an inquiry that's needed because we know the white girls were raped, gang raped, groomed. It's an investigation into who covered it up.
Yeah.
That shouldn't take 7 years. That should be pretty quick. Put the police on it, investigate who covered it up. Great show, mate. Keep it up. Lee from Newcastle.
Yeah, Lee, I think you're absolutely right, and spot on, by the way, because that's kind of where I am. I'm saying, you know, we don't need to have some ludicrously expensive 200, 300 million pound COVID-style inquiry that goes on and on and on and on, and loads of people get sort of paraded out to give their view of what happened. We know what happened. It was an absolute car crash. But what we need to know is who the people are and who the people were who were responsible for covering it up. The people who didn't allow for young girls to go into police stations and have a proper conversation. The people who've refused to prosecute certain gang members, Pakistani men, who they knew were raping children. Instead of, you know, interrogating them, instead of arresting them, they basically introduced them as if they were their boyfriends. I mean, it was ridiculous. We know all that, so yeah, you're absolutely right. Lee's right. Get it done quickly, get it done smoothly, get it done efficiently, and you could have a thing starting in January and finishing in October. It'd be as simple as that. 7 months rather than 7 years. That's what I'd say. Stephen Barrett's here, though, because there's more problems out there in the big wide world. To wit, the UK government now saying, despite the fact that they've got a £22 billion black hole to deal with, they want to give a bucket load of money to Mauritius for an island that they apparently don't want. This is a very odd story. This is the Chagos Islands, of course. The Chagos Islands people don't want to be given to Mauritius. The Mauritians don't really want Chagos Islands. Keir Starmer apparently feels that we have some reparations to give to Mauritius, and so they're offering £90 million a year over a period of time, which would lead up to about 90 billion. I don't understand it. Maybe Stephen can explain. Stephen, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I mean, normally speaking, when you get the, you know, council to come and take away your sofa or something like that, and you say, look, we don't want this anymore, they'll come and take it, and you might give them a small payment of £20 or something, but you wouldn't say, come and take my sofa away, here's £1,000, would you?
No, the entire story is absurd on its own right. Anybody with any common sense can tell that it's absolutely ridiculous. And really what it is it's part of this government being sort of sixth form politicians and living out some fantasy of the past. They've got some ridiculous idea about the evils or so-called evils of the British Empire. They want to fantasize that they can correct those, and they want to give away these islands to sort of wash clean what they see as their moral sin. But this is completely absurd. The most important point you've made, Mike, and I think this is the one that everybody just must hear, is the people of these islands do not want them given away.
Right.
There is a Twitter account called Chagosian Voices, which I follow because I want to listen to the people of the Chagos Islands.
Yeah.
Foreign Secretary did not bother. He actually misled the House, Mike. Again, another free pass for a lefty. But the Speaker didn't bother pulling him up on this. But he misled the House by saying that he had consulted the people of the Chagos Islands. He has not. And obviously the people of the Chagos Islands, being 1,000 miles or so away from Mauritius, that they are distinct peoples.
Yes.
And if you live in Mauritius, most Chagos people live here. They actually, a lot of them work at Gatwick Airport, which is one of my favourite airports, one of the nicest ones in the country. But anyway, that's where they are, because if they go to Mauritius, they actually get treated terribly badly. You know, and they're treated as second-class citizens and really quite abused. And yet we're going to give away their islands against their will to this government, which is pretty hostile to us. It's a pretty aggressive Islamist state, Mauritius. It's not necessarily our best mate.
No. And also, did they not? I mean, it was sort of undue haste that Keir Starmer got in, and suddenly, without anybody really realising, the sort of start of August, less than a month after they've got into power, suddenly he's selling off the Chagos Islands. We're going, hang on a minute, you know, how did that work? And also, if we are selling it, technically speaking, why are we paying the money in addition to that?
Well, if we were selling it, we'd receive money.
Yeah.
That's an old tradition. Call me, a bluff old traditionalist.
Yes.
So we're giving away the islands and we're giving away cash. These are extremely important strategically and militarily. This is Diego Garcia. This is a very important, mostly American, but us and American military base. We're doing this in a desperate hurry in the 11 days left before the Trump administration gets in, because no doubt the Trump administration would stop this because it's got basic common sense. It's a complete fantasy. Our government is basically wrecking our security, national security, giving away valuable assets, paying vast amounts of money to do so. You couldn't make this up, Mike.
I know.
It's completely insane. And it's against the will of the actual islanders, which is just colonial. I mean, this is actually imperialism. David Lammy is an imperialist. This is what they used to do in the 19th century.
I mean, heaven forbid that they would feel as if they were being treated as slaves of the slave owner Lammy, who's decided that he doesn't want them anymore and he's going to hand them over to be owned by somebody else. I mean, that's the allegory, isn't it?
It is, and it's really quite shocking that they're doing this. It's not required by any law. I want to make that very clear to your listeners and viewers. There was a ruling of a court which I frankly don't respect terribly much, but that court had no authority so to rule. So it shouldn't have said anything. It should have piped down. And we've got a problem at the moment in the world with these international courts sort of mouthing off when they really shouldn't. There's another one that says silly things about Israel that it shouldn't be saying anything about at all. And this one shouldn't have been saying anything about us because we gave it no authority to deal with these issues. We dealt with Mauritius's independence in 1968, at which point we gave Mauritius independence and we paid them lots of money. Well done, Mauritius. Off you pop, go and be independent. It's not a wrong, that's not a moral sin. It doesn't need atoning for, and this fantasy by the current government has to end because it's against our national interests.
Absolutely right. And we speak to the friends of the Chagosians, and we have them on this show regularly, and they're very clear that they want to be British. That's where their position. They're not interested even in admitting that they want to be an independent island, independent of everybody. They want to actually be British.
Yes, and if we're talking about international law and we're invoking it like some sort of magical power, then the right to self-determination is the most important part of international law, which means the people of the Chagos Islands get to pick, and they don't get to get given away against their will to a place that's 1,000 miles away and doesn't actually treat them very nicely.
No, indeed. And the Trump administration, as it will be, has made it pretty clear, certainly to Nigel Farage, that they will not see this going ahead anyway. So even if the Labour government managed to get it done in the next 10 days or so, it'll all get undone by Trump as soon as he's in.
Well, that just undermines why this is a pathetic frenzy by our government and why our government is very largely a joke. I mean, given what everybody said about... I don't actually know much about American politics and I don't know much about Mr. Trump, but given the way he's portrayed, isn't it surprising, Mike, that actually he's ended up being the grown-up in the room?
Yes.
I mean, this is, you know, and I'm told all sorts of things about him, and yet he ends up being the one with common sense.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. And when you're told as well by the Labour government that we're the grown-ups in the room, it rather sounds like they're pretending to be the grown-ups in the room, because if you really were, you wouldn't have to keep telling people. It's a bit like saying, I'm a really good person, you know. Do you not know how good I am? I'm really good, you know. Just do something good and maybe people will judge for themselves. Great to talk to you, Stephen. Thank you very much indeed. Stephen Barrett, barrister there, on the ludicrous story that we now not only want to give the Chagos Islands away, but we want to pay the people to take them away for the privilege of having them. What? Let's get a voice note from Mark.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark in Lancashire. Did I just hear you say that you favoured a police inquiry, police and the judiciary? So you think the police are going to be marking their own homework and we're going to get the truth? Don't make me laugh. Come on. We've got to be better than this.
Mark, you've got to listen precisely to what I said. What I said I wanted was a sort of Elliot Ness-style inquiry. You need somebody like Elliot Ness. He was brought in to break the gang culture in Chicago, and he was put out to grass so that he could get Al Capone. And he was a man who came from the Department of Justice, and he was given a sort of police-type role. That's kind of what I'm talking about, because what we need here is not to retread the same mistakes as we did before. You're quite right. And I wouldn't hire any of the police officers who were involved in it, and I wouldn't hire any of the police forces that were involved in it. What I would do is set up a special task force that had somebody with impeccable integrity at the top of that chain who would do this sort of Elliot Ness job, and if necessary kick a few doors in and arrest a few people and do the job of the police, but do it in a specific manner as set out by a parliamentary law that might be passed to make the investigation solid and to make the members of the judiciary and the members of the police that were responsible also to be held responsible. And I think that would make perfect sense. I've got this from Ian in Newark who gets it. He said, I 100% agree with you and other listeners about the rape gang inquiry. We know what happened. Let's expose the cowards that covered it up. So we're looking for Elliot Ness, basically. So if anybody's got any ideas, give us a shout. 0344 499 1000, 851.
I've got a feeling that Labour will eventually allow this inquiry, and I think they'd be well served to accept it today, because the public are now on side with an inquiry without any doubt at all. I mean, I have to say, from my point of view, there is a stink in the air about this whole issue of grooming gangs. What were the authorities doing? What were they not doing? Was there some sort of blanket put over the whole issue of this being predominantly around men of Pakistani heritage?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the home of common sense, 8:54. By the way, just a little aside, a little news story that I've just spotted here. Jaguar sales have dropped by more than a quarter in recent weeks. Now, isn't that funny? They only just relaunched and rebranded themselves. You remember, they got all woke and decided to churn out these ridiculous pink and blue electric cars. Well, the number of cars they sold fell by 12,459 to just 33,000 in 2024. Do you know, believe it or not, in previous years they used to sell 160,000 plus cars. So there you go. Jaguar, another woke going broke scenario. Idiots. Let's get a voice note from Ash.
Morning, Mike. Ash from Preston. Imagine having the gall to tell your MPs to stick to a 3-line whip or you'll get kicked out of the party, and then not voting the same way as them yourself, along with many of your cabinet ministers. Nothing gets up an MP's nose like being made to look a complete moron in front of the entire country, and that's what Starmer's just done to his MPs, just like Boris did during the Chris Pincher affair when he sent his MPs out to defend him and then completely U-turned. This could bring Starmer down.
It certainly could. I think there's so much that could bring him down, and he's teetering on the edge, I have to say. Let's talk down to Chris Middleton, though, writer of Freezing This Christmas. You might remember the song. It came out, went right to the top of the charts. I don't think it quite pipped the Christmas #1, but it came pretty damn close. He called himself Starmer and the Granny Harmers. And what we didn't know, I guess, at the time when he wrote it, when he appeared on our show, was that Chris Middleton was also a freelance newsreader for the BBC. But because of interviews that he did with us and a few other people, basically he's been told by the BBC that he can't work there anymore. Chris, a very good morning to you.
Hi, Mike. Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Not at all. Good to see you. You did very, very well. Congratulations should be given to you, first of all, for writing the song, getting it out there, raising all that money for charity and really making a difference, I think, for many, many people. And it was a great production. But the BBC proved themselves to be the Grinch, not just before Christmas, but after Christmas as well, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely, yes. It was just a few weeks before Christmas. Obviously, it was a Christmas song, and my plan initially with the song, Mike, was to put it out anonymously. Yeah. I had absolutely no idea how well it would do. I even thought, it might go nowhere and I'll raise absolutely no money, but I'll stay anonymous so I can just push that under the rug and move on with my life. But once it kind of got out there, once it got picked up by various media, including yourself, I then sort of had a choice. Do I put my name out there? Do I put my face out there to try and push the song as much as I can? Or do I stay anonymous and maybe it just doesn't do as well? And I had that choice. I thought about it for a long time, but I'd had so many comments from people, Mike, hundreds, if not thousands by that point already, from pensioners who were struggling, thanking me for shining a light on the issue. So many nice comments that I just couldn't, I couldn't not have put myself out there, really. I felt morally obligated to keep pushing it, to try and help the pensioners. Right.
And so were you sort of persona non grata then at BBC Newcastle when they found out that it was you?
Well, essentially, yes.
What's wrong with them?
Yeah, well, it's sad in a way. It's a sad way for it all to end, Right. I worked there as a freelancer for 6 years. Right. And then I told them I was doing this. I told them I was going to go and do various media appearances. And the next thing I heard was not from even any of my direct managers. It was from someone I'd never heard of at the BBC getting in touch with me, someone higher up, presumably, saying basically that they'd cancelled all my shifts for the rest of December and January.
That's appalling, isn't it? And they give you no notice, no recompense, because, they're always telling us about how well they treat their employees. Obviously not in your case.
No, well, unfortunately, at the BBC, and I assume it's similar in other media places as well, if you're a freelancer, you're kind of at the bottom of the totem pole, aren't you?
Yeah, but they're not supposed to be run like a commercial organisation. We have to do things like that because we actually have to make money. But the BBC doesn't. So they're supposed to be the beacon of, social justice, aren't they?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one, isn't it, Mike? Like, I don't know about you. The reason that I wanted to get into journalism in the first place was because I wanted to hold those in power to account.
Yeah, totally.
So that's to me, that's the whole point of journalism. And if you're just towing the party line, then you're not doing journalism, are you? You're essentially just doing PR for whoever's in power at the moment. And putting this song out, okay, the song isn't journalism, it's a song. But I would say in 2 weeks, that song has done more to hold people to account, the government in this instance to account, than I'd done in 6 years at the BBC.
Very much. Well, maybe you should do another song. and put it out there. Maybe we should collaborate in some way. Let's keep in touch and we'll see what we can do. 8:59, 25. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to be talking to Neil O'Brien, Conservative MP for Harborough, Oadby and Weakston. We'll get his view on the cowardly vote that took place last night in the House of Commons. All, of course, of those Labour MPs voting against an inquiry. We've got also John Rentoul as well.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 2 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. The sun appears to be shining out there at the moment, which is rather nice. There's a lot of snow on the ground. A lot of schools have apparently been closed for most of this week in certain parts of the country, which seems to me to be a bit daft, considering they've only just opened for the January season. Open the schools. No, shut the schools. Shut them. There's too much snow on the ground. Of course, we know that ASLEF, the train drivers union, don't allow people to walk on the snow. They can't get on trains because, of course, it's far too dangerous to the Health and Safety Brigade. We'll talk about the snow. We'll talk about the weather. There's more cold weather coming. It's going to be minus 15 in some parts of the country, particularly up north in Scotland, where there's going to be carnage, no doubt. And you've got to feel for some of the poor pensioners in this country after they've had their winter fuel allowance taken away by Keir Starmer, the farmer harmer. Last night, he's also decided to clamp down on any form of an inquiry being offered or ordered into the grooming gang scandal. We've been talking about it here for the last few days on Talk, and of course one thing you can say is that the nation's mood is not the same as Keir Starmer's. The people of this country want an inquiry. They want people held responsible. They want them to be held responsible and then possibly punished and possibly put in jail if they covered up this ghastly, horrendous, hideous pastime that's been going on now for more than 2 decades. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about David Lammy. He's out and about this morning telling us all how they're going to be clamping down on the people smuggling gangs. But of course, they're not really, are they? He claims he's doing something that no other country in the world has done. Well, they're not. That's not true. He's also saying that they're going to bring some legislation into Parliament later this year, so they're not actually doing anything at all. What an absolute shambles. Rachel Reeves, meanwhile, is off to China. Of course, she'll be able to boast that when she goes there, she was the first female chancellor ever.
It will also be the first budget delivered by a woman ever. That is a moment of pride. When Rachel Reeves stands up, she will be making history. And I can tell you, young women and girls across the country will be watching, they will look up, and they will notice.
Yeah, and they'll go, Jesus Christ, what on earth has happened to the markets? The Treasury has stepped in to halt market mayhem. So well done, Sir Keir. Look how happy he was then, in happier times, when things weren't quite so complicated. Rachel Reeves, as I say, off to China. Red alerts going off all over the place, all over the... dive! The economy's going down the gurgler. That's where we are. Neil O'Brien's coming up next. John Rentoul as well. He'll probably tell me it's not a story. This is Talk. Got this from Steve, who says, on the Chagos Islands, David Lammy stood in Parliament weeks ago and said the deal would be put before the House after it had been signed. Yeah, true. And Catherine in Cardiff says, Mike, I know Elon Musk is eccentric, however, his intervention has finally burst the dam here. At long last, we, the cowed, are being able to speak out about what we've all seen with our own eyes over the last 25 years or so. Very true. And we know also from the piece in the Times this morning that the Labour Party's general policy is that the phrase grooming gang should not be used because it's basically racist. Let's talk to Neil O'Brien, Conservative MP for Harborough, Oadby and Wigston. Neil, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you too.
I don't think we can quite hear you. Are we hearing him?
You're not hearing me.
And we'll come back. We'll come back to you.
An issue with the mic, I think.
Sorry, Neil, are you there?
I'm here.
You are, sorry. Thank you very much. Yeah, we can hear you now. There's a slight delay on the line. Let's start off, first of all, with the vote last night. Keir Starmer ordered all of his MPs by a three-line whip to vote against any kind of inquiry. The mood of the nation would suggest that he's completely wrong about that. What have you got to say?
I just thought it was disgraceful. It was depressing watching all these people who've been given a three-line whip traipsing through the lobbies to vote down a national inquiry into this huge scandal. And the worst thing about it is this all started with Oldham Council making a perfectly reasonable request to the government because they don't have the powers to do a local inquiry. They don't have the powers to get to the truth. They can't summon witnesses or get evidence or make people give witnesses under oath. And so they appealed to the government for help for a national inquiry, and the government said no. That's how this all started. And it's a disgrace. We now know there's 40 to 50 places where this grooming gang activity took place. And the government say, oh, there should be local inquiries. But there have been years in which that could have happened. And the truth is that a lot of the time, the local officials were the people who were looking the other way. They were the people who were covering up. You can't expect them to be the people who lead the inquiry into this. In fact, when the government was saying the other night, oh, local inquiries are the answer, in Keighley, one of the places where some of the most horrific stuff happened, they were voting to block a local inquiry. So this will not stand. I mean, the government's line is crumbling. Jess Phillips yesterday was forced to say, oh, look, if victims want a national inquiry, there should be one. But we already know victims do want a national inquiry. Yeah. So look, last night was just the first vote. We will make Labour MPs vote again on this, and hopefully they will eventually do the right thing and listen to victims.
Yeah, I mean, the Labour government at the moment have got a bit of a reputation for being very pig-headed about everything. You know, they could have done everything differently. They didn't have to go after pensioners' fuel allowance straight away this winter. They didn't have to put the VAT on schools in January. They could have waited. But they don't seem to be very keen on changing their minds or admitting that they've got something wrong. Why would he do it on this?
No, I do think Keir Starmer is a proud man. And you've seen that on the winter fuel payments. So, you know, there's no money for winter fuel payments, there's no money to keep bus fares down, we've all got to pay more tax, and yet there's 9 billion quid to pay to have the Chagos Islands taken off of us, our own territory. Yeah. And so it's all about priorities. And with Starmer, he is a proud man. He doesn't like saying he was wrong. On the winter fuel stuff, you know, we know now that there are 800,000 pensioners who are below the government's own poverty line, they're not eligible for pension credit, and yet they're having the winter fuel payment take away from them. And as it gets really cold, those people will be really suffering, and yet the government just cannot, they're so proud, they cannot bring themselves to change their mind. But on the grooming gangs things, we are going to keep pressing and pressing on this, and they can vote again on this, and they can do the right thing, because ultimately the stuff that is now coming out and is finally emerging is horrific, and the more people see of it, they will have a burning sense that justice has got to be done for these girls, because they've waited so long and the government are just blocking and blocking and blocking and deflecting. And it's the same behaviour, by the way, that caused this scandal in the first place. This attempt to block and deflect and turn it all into politics and to worry more about the sensitivities than the victims. It's the same pattern of behaviour that caused this problem in the first place, and I can't believe the government haven't learned a lesson.
Yeah, it is hard to believe. Let me get you just finally on Rachel Reeves. Rachel Reeves going off to China apparently this week. She's being urged not to go because the state of the economy is such that the Treasury has had to step in to halt the mayhem on the markets. I mean, I don't know what the market's going to be doing today. I haven't checked them yet. But, I mean, the borrowing levels now are so high that people are calling them toxic. The markets are plunging. Gilt prices are going through the roof. The Chancellor's now facing a £10 billion a year increase in debt interest payments. I mean, a lot of people are saying, forget about Liz Truss, this is far worse.
Yeah, this is appalling. It's not a good sign when the Chancellor has to put out panicky statements to try and calm the markets because everything's melting down. But the truth is, we don't need to get too technical about this. What this really means for you and me is that the government are going to be spending more of your tax money, not on health or education or more police officers, but on servicing debt, because they have blown up the cost of government borrowing with their awful budget, which even the Bank of England, which never says these things, has criticised, which has taken our borrowing costs to the highest since the late 1980s, which has taken the tax burden to a record high and our debt level to a record high. I mean, it really is a catastrophic budget, which, you know, it's just unravelling every single day. And they've just made, it's the wrong priorities. They can find money for, you know, international human rights wheezers like giving away the Chagos Islands, but they can't find money for the people who are really struggling in this country, like freezing pensioners. It's just the wrong priorities again and again, and a budget that has just tanked our economy and is now going to make us pay even more to get even less. I mean, it really is the chickens coming home to roost from a budget that has just clearly failed.
I think so. She's taking Andrew Bailey with her to China. Maybe they should both just stay there and see if they could wreck the Chinese economy. That was my suggestion earlier. And then we can be left to get on with us.
This is why they spend so much... Yeah, this is why Keir spends so much time out of the country now. He's probably more popular there than he is here.
Very possibly so. Neil O'Brien, thank you very much indeed, Conservative MP for Harborough, Oderby and Wigston. Let me tell you this. Keir Starmer said wealth creation was his #1 mission. Huh? How's that going, Sir Keir? Let's ask John Rentoul, Chief Political Commentator for The Independent. John, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Have you got any stories?
I haven't got many stories, no, but I've got one or two suggestions for you. How's your wealth creating going these days? Because it seems like Keir Starmer's determined to make us all poorer.
Well, I'm a bit surprised with you saying that things are far worse than they were under Liz Truss.
They are.
I'm very surprised by Neil O'Brien, who is a extremely sensible Conservative MP, appearing to agree with you.
Well, sensible people tend to agree with me, John, because I speak an awful lot of sense, and you know, I actually tell it like it is. I don't pretend that something else is happening. I mean, have you seen the story this morning that Liz Truss has actually sent a legal letter to Sir Keir Starmer saying he needs to cease and desist from claiming that she crashed the economy. And particularly,
it's in green ink, I think.
Well, it may well be, but it's not in red ink, which is what he's now having to write in because everything's down below the line. The point is that at the end of the day, you know, whatever happened under Liz Truss has been made far worse by Rachel Reeves.
No, that's not true. I mean, as Neil O'Brien said, I mean, the chickens are coming home to roost, but they're the chickens of the Tory fiscal irresponsibility.
Well, let me give you a couple of chickens that you can count, right? 30-year UK government bonds have reached their highest level since 1998. The 10-year UK government bonds are at their highest rate since 2008, right? Now, as far as I remember, that was the last time Labour were in, wasn't it? 2008. 1998. Sterling is at its weakest level for 13 months.
Yeah, but since then we've had a period of ultra low interest rates around the world, which has now come to an end.
Yeah, you can't start blaming the rest of the world. I mean, these lot have been
I'm not blaming the rest of the world. I'm explaining to you what's happening, Mike, which is that interest rates are going up all over the world. If you look at 30-year rates in the United States, they're not that different from ours.
But the United States economy is growing, and ours isn't.
Yeah, no, I know, and that's a real problem. I mean, I accept. This is not a good situation, but to suggest that Rachel Reeves herself has made it worse is.
Rachel Reeves came in. Hang on, Rachel Reeves came into power, right? As she was very highly praised by Keir Starmer as the first woman chancellor. She was going to make a great deal of difference. She was all about growth. She waited possibly too long to deliver a budget, which was highly anticipated. I think you've agreed with me on that before. And when she did finally deliver the budget, people were aghast because she thought it was great. And she was she looked a bit like Prince Andrew after he was interviewed by Emily Maitlis. You know, she's walking around going, look at this, hey, well, we've done a great budget. And then about 2 weeks later, everything's crashing and burning.
No, people were aghast because she raised taxes, having said she wouldn't.
No, it's not just about
in the election campaign. No. And as I'd pointed out endlessly before then and said to you, she was going to have to raise taxes. So when she did, it shouldn't have come as a surprise.
No, but that wasn't the shock.
To compare her budget to Liz Truss's disastrous budget, which did crash the economy briefly.
Well, it didn't actually, no.
It was rescued by Jeremy Hunt.
It got heavily criticised by people in the city, which this one didn't, because people are giving her a bit more of a chance because she's a bit of a novice, and they thought, well, let's see how it goes. But ever since the budget was announced, things have gone from bad to worse because the economy's now in a worse state than it was in November, isn't it? Yes.
I'm not sure about that. I mean,
well, the FTSE 200 dropped massively yesterday. As I said, the rate of sterling is its weakest in 13 months. You know, the currency's crashing, the stock market's crashing, pension funds will be losing money.
No,
pension funds will be losing money.
The crashing is, Mike. Crashing is what happened after Liz Truss's mini budget.
No, it's no different.
This is a much more gradual process. It's not good.
It doesn't matter how you crash.
I'm not pretending that things are sort of rosy and bright. But the economy is in a very difficult position, and Rachel Reeves has some very difficult decisions to make.
I mean, all I can do, John, is to refer you...
that taxes are going to have to rise more.
Yeah, all I can do is refer you to people who know an awful lot more about the economy than probably both of us put together, who are warning that we've got some very dark days ahead, and that taxes are probably going to have to be raised even more.
Those are not the result, primarily, of decisions that Rachel Reeves has made.
Well, they are.
Unlike Liz Truss's unfunded tax cuts, which would have blown up the economy if they'd been allowed to stand. I mean, they were instantly reversed, which saved the economy from being crashed. So perhaps
it didn't crash then.
Truss's legal letter
it didn't crash. So what you're saying, it didn't crash?
Well, she was crashing the economy.
Oh, right. So it's a very interesting use of language. You see, this is my point.
She had to get Jeremy Hunt in to reverse all her policies.
Right, but you're now. Hang on, but you're now sort of reversing 100 miles an hour from the word crash. You say that she crashed the economy, but now you're saying the economy didn't crash because it was saved by Jeremy Hunt. You can't have it both ways. No. It didn't crash, did it?
Well, it was crashing. Well, it would have crashed if those.
Well, if you're in a car hurtling towards a lamppost and you don't hit the lamppost because you stop in time, then you haven't crashed the car, have you?
Well, we could spend hours on detailed.
We could, but this is my point, and this would be
whether a metaphor is correct or not.
But this would be.
Hang on. Her policies were absolutely disastrous.
Her policies
reversed at speed, and if she'd been allowed to continue, then goodness knows where we'd be.
Well, that's true, but the point is that. My point is that the way that the Liz Truss's budget was received was entirely different to the way that Rachel Reeves' budget was received. Because
Rachel Reeves' budget was broadly sensible.
No, but it wasn't.
Budget was disastrous.
No, it wasn't. The point
That's why they were received differently.
No, the point is that they were both disastrous, but for different reasons. I mean, I can admit that because I'm neutral. You can't admit it because you like Rachel Reeves better than Liz Truss. Of course I am. That's why people.
You and I have been doing this for long enough.
That's why people flock to this show, because they know that they'll get the truth told to them in a way which is entirely and utterly fair. You know, if I thought Liz Truss had done a terrible thing, I would tell you. But I don't think she did. I thought she was badly treated. I thought she was unfortunate in the way that she delivered the budget. and Kwasi Kwarteng should have been cleverer about the way that they sold it to the city before they did it. But at the end of the day, what she was proposing wasn't so wildly out of kilter with what an awful lot of other economists have said and done in the past. And so now, Rachel Reeves has been proven to be a complete and utter dud. Everyone who is anyone in the financial sector has said that, right? And so, in the end, I'm saying that they've both been treated very differently. And in the end, I think we're in a worse financial economic situation now than we were when Jeremy Hunt came in to fix the Liz Truss problem.
And you think that describing Liz Truss's budget as sensible is impartial?
I think it's, well, and that's my opinion. It's impartial in the sense that, you know, I don't say that it was a great budget because I support the Tory party, because I don't support the Tory party. I never voted Tory in my life.
Yeah, but you support unfunded tax cuts. That seems
I support tax
quite
cuts.
An extreme political position. I think you're getting yourself tied into terrible knots.
Not at all, because when you say unfunded, everything that this government did was supposed to be properly funded and properly costed. But it now turns out they didn't properly fund and cost anything, because apparently now what they did is going to result in more taxes going up. Because why? Because as Neil O'Brien just explained... Because Neil O'Brien has just explained we've had to borrow so much money that we're going to be wasting more taxpayers' money on paying it back with interest.
Yeah, and last time I was on here, you wanted to borrow more to solve social care. So,
no, I didn't.
When
did I say that? I'm not interested in borrowing more. I don't want to borrow more.
Last time I was on here, your little rant that you did before I came on was
you mean my well-considered analytical view?
Your well-considered analysis of current political trends included your condemnation of Keir Starmer's government for having kicked social care reform into the long grass.
Yes.
Now, what you mean by that is that
so you're interpreting what I meant. No.
And spending more on social care and putting up taxes.
No. So you're assuming that that's what I meant.
Left that bit out.
I didn't say that. I didn't leave it out. I didn't say it. What I said was that... No, hang on. No, well, I didn't leave it out. What I said was...
You criticised the government for postponing social care reform. What did you mean by that?
Well, I criticised the government for postponing something they said they were going to fix, right? And if you get into government on the basis that you're going to fix something, and then you say, oh, actually, we're not going to fix it, we're going to push it down the road for 3 more years, then I'm going to be critical of them. I haven't offered them an alternative.
But Mike, you've got to be critical on the basis of what your preferred policy is.
My job is not to...
And you're implying that you want to put up taxes.
Well, you don't know what I'm implying. No, you don't know what I'm implying, because only I know what I'm implying. But the bottom line is I'm not hired to be a fiscal commentator. I'm not hired to make fiscal policy.
I'm very glad to hear that.
I'm not hired.
No,
I'm not. No, that's not my speciality. Is not to propose fiscal policy for this government, right? If they want me to do that, they'll have to pay me an awful lot of money.
Sounded like it over the past 5 minutes. You've been criticising Liz Truss.
Yeah, I am.
I mean, you've been praising Liz Truss and criticising Rachel Reeves. I think you've got them the wrong way around.
OK, well, how about this headline? Can Rachel Reeves prove she can make Britain grow? This might be the last chance she has to save her job. Now, whoever wrote that must think she's in a bit of trouble.
You're quite right. I think she is.
And who did write that?
And I don't think she's made all the right decisions. But to compare,
so you mean she's made some wrong decisions?
Budget to Liz Truss's budget, which was objectively an absolute disaster.
Yeah, but why can't you just move on from that? That was ages ago.
Well, yeah, but no, but you're the one trying to pretend that Rachel Reeves is as bad.
Yes, it is.
I'm saying that Rachel Reeves has made some mistakes, but she's nowhere near.
All right, let me ask you this then. Why do you think this might be the last chance she has to save her job then?
Well, I didn't write that headline, but...
you wrote the piece accompanied by the headline.
Yeah, well, in which I said that I think she was facing some very difficult choices. She's going to have to put up taxes, increase borrowing, and cut spending, and I think that's going to be
all things that she said she would not do. Right, all things that she said she wouldn't need to do because she had a fully costed plan. We have a plan, was the words that they kept saying. We know that we've costed every single thing. We're ready to hit the ground running. We are absolutely fine. So what's changed since July?
Well, that's the point I was making in that article, is that she was unwise to say after the budget that we will not be coming back for more. That was a foolish thing to say, because chancellors Chancellors ought to recognise that economic circumstances can change, and they have changed adversely for her.
They've changed adversely. Well, guess why they've changed adversely? Because they've put the sorts of taxes and the sorts of punitive measures onto companies, which have meant that growth has not only stopped, it's stagnated. It started going in the opposite direction because we've got every single company. We've got yes, we have. The Chamber of Commerce has come out and said that basically most of the people that are allied with them are going to be firing people. They're going to have to put prices up because of the increased national insurance they're having to pay. Hospitality is shutting down. People are losing their jobs. People are losing their incomes. People are losing their businesses as a result. Growth is not coming anytime soon. We've got a piece in the Sun.
So what was the alternative?
Food prices are going to rise 4.5% over the course of the next few weeks and months. The budget's business tax hike is putting a squeeze on British business. Now that is what's changed, and that's what's caused even more economic downturn than there was in November.
No, that's not true. What was the alternative, Mike? Because taxes had to go up, or spending had to be cut, or borrowing had to be increased.
Let's see.
Which one did you advocate? Which one did the British Chambers of Commerce
I've already suggested, John, if you've been paying attention, that you could have saved several £billion over the course of a year by not being slavishly aligned to the net zero madness that Ed Miliband seems to be banging on about. And your fellow colleague, Dan Hodges, only the other day said, actually, there are people inside the Labour government now, the Labour government, who are saying Ed Miliband's gone mad, he's lost his marbles, we need to stop him from completely wrecking the party and the government by spending all of this money.
Dan Hodges is a great man, but he's not actually a colleague. He works.
Well, he's a colleague in the sense that you're both.
For the Daily Mail.
No, but you're both political commentators. I would say that makes you colleagues.
And we're sort of Blairites, although Dan Hodges used to be a Gordon Brown.
Dan Hodges agrees with me a lot these days. People think he's gone mad.
But my point is that net zero.
Is a waste of money.
I completely agree with most of your criticisms of Ed Miliband on his net zero policies, but the costs of those currently are not huge, and I don't think there are vast savings to be made by.
Well, they've already handed billions abroad, haven't they, to people to control their particular view on net zero. Billions and billions of pounds.
That's part of the foreign aid budget.
This is extra money which they've given to help climate change in foreign countries. What I'm saying is, John, as you know, choices can be made. I mean, that's what Labour say all the time. We've had to make difficult choices. Well, they have made choices, but an awful lot of those choices didn't have to be made. And if they really wanted to save money, and if they really wanted to be different, they didn't have to put all of the taxes on the people that they've done.
Well, but they did have to put taxes on somebody.
Well, I take a different view. I take the Reaganite view on this, that if you spend less in government, then you reap the rewards of it in the growth of the economy, because people will have more of their own money to spend and they'll spend it. But unfortunately, the government is now so bleeding big, and I blame the Tories as well for that they've got to pay for all of these people that are employed in it. I mean, there are more people working in Whitehall now than ever.
Well, you've got to specify what spending you want to cut, and so far you've come up with net zero, which is
as I say, I'm not employed. If you want me to produce a paper which would tell you exactly how to fix the economy, I'll do so. But that's not my job. You know, my job is to raise questions about how the government is stewarding the economy. And I would say we've got plenty of questions which aren't being answered. And breaking piece of news here, Mel Stride is about to ask an urgent question to Rachel Reeves. He wants her to make a statement on the growing pressure of borrowing costs on the public finances. So we're now...
Well, that'll be very interesting, won't it, Mike? Because then Mel Stride will have a chance to set out what the Conservatives would do instead. Now, given that
not
the
really, no, because
are committed to net zero,
it's not his job
also
either.
Committed to the foreign aid budget. Where are they going to cut?
No, but John,
where are they going to cut spending?
Well, surely that's Rachel. Maybe, I'll tell you. Well, she could save a few quid by not going to China for a start with a great big entourage. I mean, you could start there.
I don't think that's really going to make a difference to the economy.
Of course. But what I'm saying is, you could start where you mean to go on, which is to stop spending ridiculous amounts of money on things that aren't necessary. Right? They said they're going to stop the boats. Right? They've come out.
It's very easy to say. It's not so easy to do.
No, of course. Well, that's what they're finding out, isn't it? But they said it was easy to do. They said on July the 3rd that they were ready to hit the ground running. They said that everything they were going to do has been fully costed. And even though Keir Starmer admitted back in April that he knew there was a £54 billion black hole, apparently it was a surprise when he found it after he got into Downing Street. You know, you can't keep defending them, John. You know that this is a hopeless government which is going faster down the luge of despair than any government we've ever seen. They're now, what, minus 45 approval rating? I mean, come on.
Well, we'll see about that. I mean, the Conservatives aren't exactly.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter what the Conservatives are doing. I'm not sitting here fighting for the Conservatives. I'm not interested in the Conservatives. They're not in government. The Labour government is useless. You know it, I know it, and even you have written to that effect. But you can't come on here and admit it because obviously you have to still stay loyal to your side.
But... not at all. No, I come on here to have an interesting debate with you, Mike. And when you make absurd claims, such as Rachel Reeves being as bad as Liz Truss,
she is though.
I have to contradict you.
All right. Well, let me put it to you this way:
Liz Truss's unfunded tax cuts were.
Let me put it to you this way:
this government has not had a great start, and
that's the understatement of the year.
Wrong, and some of its priorities are wrong. But I mean, the broad approach in the budget of raising taxes was necessary. There was no way around it, and it's been extremely difficult.
Yes, but even
I don't see any alternative really that's been proposed.
Yeah, but even if there was no way around it, they've handled it badly. If they now think that they can put more taxes on people, they will become even more unpopular. Business will fail even quicker. The economy will fall even further into a black hole, and the growth that they say that they want to see will be even further away. So, I mean, you're looking at a kind of cycle of despair here, aren't you?
No, I think that's the danger, and that's the real the real worry that Rachel Reeves must have as she heads off to. Because there's nothing
she can do that can seemingly fix it. And I'll tell you this. When Liz Truss had her little economic wobble, in whichever way you want to describe it, I was not sitting here thinking, I wonder if this is going to affect my pension. But people are now sitting here at the moment thinking, how is this going to affect my pension? If this economy continues to collapse in the way that it's going and taxes go up and up and up, how is that going to affect the market? How is it going to affect my pension fund, my pension pot, my retirement? You know, people are going to start getting very twitchy. And that's when governments tend to get even more twitchy. And sometimes that's when the Chancellor of the Exchequer gets the sack.
You really should have been worrying about your pension after Liz Truss's budget. I mean, that was the whole point. That was why.
Yeah, but my pension's fine.
She had to reverse all those policies because.
Yeah, but my pension's fine.
Gone down the pan.
But my pension's fine. But it might not be this time next week.
Well, I don't know about this time next week. I mean, you know, this time next year, perhaps, you know, there might be problems.
Oh, great! Something to look forward to. I mean, you're doing very well, John, but I'm afraid there is nothing positive that you can say about Rachel Reeves and the economy, is there, really?
Yes, there is. I've just said it, which is that you know I don't see, broadly speaking, I don't see any big alternative being proposed that's much better.
Well, that's not good news.
I think you can argue at the margins about which taxes she should have raised.
But I'm asking you a macro.
Taxes had to go up.
But I'm asking you a macroeconomic question. There's nothing good about the way this economy is being
stewarded. I'm giving you a macroeconomic answer.
Yeah, well, so I'm not.
Taxes, broadly speaking, taxes had to go up.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that you can't give me anything to look forward to or to hope for in the sense that the economy is going to bounce back at any point, because nobody can, because it's all going in the wrong direction. And it's going in the wrong direction because Rachel Reeves' economic policy and fiscal policy has been a disaster. And it's that simple.
No, that's not why it's going in the wrong direction. It's going in the wrong direction because, you know, there are world economic factors which are not great.
Well, why is America growing then?
Well, we'll see how long that continues.
Well, it is though, isn't it?
Yeah, no, the American growth is the outlier. It's odd and it's.
Well, it's not odd. It's happening because of their fiscal policy.
All the other countries in the G7 are not growing.
That's because most of them are in Europe.
Similar problems to us.
Well, China's growing.
Well, China's not really comparable to the UK.
Yeah, but it's in the G7 now. You just said all the other countries are not growing.
No, China's not in the G7, is it?
Yeah, of course it is. That's why they have G7 meetings.
Oh, okay.
China, you know. Anyway, listen, it's been a delight as ever, John. Hopefully we'll be able to pay the bills enough for the next time we can talk. I mean, I might be sitting here impoverished, you know, with a candle, because also, don't forget, the national grid's about to collapse on us as well, because they've siphoned off all the oil and gas, and we can't actually heat our homes because wind turbines don't work. Anyway, John, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Chief political commentator at The Independent. Fascinating, isn't it? Let's get a voice note from Brian.
Hi, Mike. Brian from the South End. Just on Starmer. What an absolute disgrace him and his front bench are. Abstaining. It just shows what cowards they are. And making all the MPs vote to the whip. It's like a leader. It goes over the top but stays at the back while all his men go forward and get gunned down. He's sent them all to the wolves, because once all this comes out, I don't think many of them are going to have a future in the political arena. It's just a disgrace, and it shows what cowards they are. Utter cowards.
Absolutely right. Well said, Brian. Thank you very much indeed for that. Cowards is the way to support and to blame these people, because that's entirely what they are. They've all voted against the will of the people, and they should be punished for that, in my view. Vote them out at the next election, if not earlier. This is Talk.
Man who leads our country should be so out of touch with how the people that he is supposed to represent feel. You know, I am rarely really triggered by politicians. You know, I spend all my time listening to their verbiage, but that comment actually really gets me, because it is so insulting to voters. It's so insulting to all those children who were abused.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:37. We're running a bit late this morning, I'm afraid, so we have to go straight on to Stephen Wall. But first, a voice note from Brian on the inquiry. Oh, sorry, that's an old one. No, we won't do that. Well, even better, then. We can get to Stephen Wolfe even quicker. He is, of course, the Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Stephen, very good morning to you.
Very good morning, Mike.
Sorry to keep you waiting now. I was giving John Renton a bit of a going over. Here's the thing. David Lammy, right, has come out and said, we're doing something that no other country in the world has done. Which I'm pretty sure is a lie, because they're saying that they're going after the people smuggling gangs. Well, lots of other people have done that, and if they are going to try and do things that no other country has done, why don't they just send them all back?
Well, yeah, I would say that this new scheme that they're coming up with, which is an idea that I promoted and many others have, which is that we use our soft and hard power by preventing countries from receiving grants, funding or aid if they don't accept back migrants who have come across illegally on our channel or failed asylum seekers. It's about time. But the question is, to answer yours, is yeah, of course many other countries have tried to stop channel migrants coming across or illegal migrants. And if they really wanted to, they could do it in a different way. And I think it's good news that they're trying this. I wonder when I'm looking at the fine details, because we haven't been given that, whether it will work. But I will give them credit for credit's due on this particular occasion that they're at least trying something that many of us have said they should do.
Well, they're saying they're going to go after the bank accounts and the sort of assets of these individuals who run the smuggling gangs. But I presume that's easier said than done because, you know, they're basically career criminals, they're fraudsters, they're gangsters. They're not going to have, you know, an account at the sort of NatWest down the high street, are they? They've probably got a lot of their money in cryptocurrency. They've probably got properties around the world that nobody can trace. You know, they're very clever people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've look at the numbers. We've only had, thankfully, just 61 that have come across the boats since January the 1st. But that amounts to £3 million over the next year to the government in taxpayers. But for the people smugglers, that one boat journey made them £305,000. But they do it through debt, Mike. I mean, you look at that case in Aberystwyth, which showed that the people smugglers were opening up barber shops and other places where they get cash.
Right.
The cash is just sent back to Europe and then distributed into dollars and euros and other currencies.
Right.
So they don't necessarily need to do bank accounts. And the only way they can is if these bank accounts are in countries where they can start using the anti-money laundering systems in place.
Yeah, right. Do you know, I heard a new one the other day. Somebody was telling me that in certain parts of London now, they've given up on the barber shops because you can't really launder that much money through a barber shop, and they've now started opening up sort of dental care practices, private practices, because, you know, when you do private dentistry, you can charge people a lot more money than you can for a haircut. And so an awful lot of these places have been growing up, and you don't know how many clients they've got, you don't know how much money's swilling through it, but apparently this is another way of money laundering which is going on even as we speak.
Yeah, that's very, very smart. When I first entered in the financial services world over 25 years ago, Mike, we used to receive, and you'll believe this or not, there was a magazine that was sent out by the United States called Money Laundering Monthly. And money laundering, you just can't make it up. You just can't make it. And what it did is it described all the different types of money laundering schemes, like it used to be pizza shops and restaurants like that, where money would come in. Today, the Albanians in particular are taking this to a new level. You know, the idea that you can have, like, dentist practices or even do cosmetic surgery areas where you can spend a lot more, they're just cleverer.
Yeah.
And we do not have the police that are willing to engage in it too much.
Right, exactly. And they've got these, you know, sort of complete and utter corporations, illegal corporations that are set up in order not to be investigated and found by the authorities. But listen, Stephen, we've got to let you go because we didn't have a lot of time. Sorry, we'll get you back on soon. Stephen Wolfe, Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Bit of breaking news, by the way, on the NHS. Apparently, some new figures are coming out just now as we speak. Staff experienced the busiest year on record for A&E and ambulance services last year. There was an average of 5,407 patients a day in hospital with flu last week, including 256 in critical care. We also heard yesterday, did we not, that the average wait now for some people in A&E is 50 hours. People are waiting for more than 2 days to be seen in an A&E. And today, the instruction that's come out of the NHS is that if you are going to go into A&E, please just go on your own. Don't bring anybody with you because there's not enough space. Brilliant. Welcome to Britain. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:45. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here just before that to tell you what's coming up on her show. We had some breaking news just then. Staff experienced the busiest year on record at the NHS for A&E and ambulance services last year. We'll be getting to that with Dr Ron Daniels very shortly, Chief Medical Officer at UK Sepsis Trust, also an NHS intensive care clinician. A bit more breaking news for you. Manchester Airport has just stopped all flights in order to clear heavy snow from the runway. So, as I said, there's going to be disruption up and down the country, probably on the railways as well as on the roads, and of course at the airports as well. Let's get a voice note from Chris on the economy.
Great show as always. It's just I can't believe that things are this bad. I thought they were going to be bad, but as you've said, on every single front, I've been keeping a record of Starmer's performance, and it's up to 40 major items now. I've got a list as long as my arm, and I'm just going to go in to add the grooming scandal to it. On the budget situation, Liz Truss, you've just talked to John Rentoul. Liz Truss, perhaps it would have crashed the economy, but it didn't crash the economy. It created problems, but it didn't crash the economy. It was reversed. This one of Rachel Reeves, it hasn't been reversed. It's creating havoc. And I seem to recall Kwesi Kwarteng being sacked and Liz Truss resigning. I'm hoping maybe that we'll get the same from Labour.
I think you will probably almost certainly see Rachel Reeves resigning, because there is absolutely no light at the end of any tunnel whatsoever economically. This from Good Deep, who says, "Morning, Mike. To cut down on spending, stop sending taxpayers' money to other countries and stop handing out benefits to people who are here illegally and who are claiming benefits fraudulently. Sort out communities who are running the black economy. I don't care if this sounds like I'm jumping on the far-right bandwagon." Did you notice on PMQs that he didn't say jumping on the far-right bandwagon? He just used the words jumping on the bandwagon. Yeah, well, a lot of people noticed that yesterday, that Keir Starmer seemed to sort of walk back slightly his accusation that everybody in Britain who wants to have an inquiry into the grooming gangs is in fact far right, and he tried to make it look as if he had somehow modified his position. But obviously, with the vote going the way that it went, the position hasn't really been modified, and we've still got the Labour government unwilling and incapable, it seems, of actually investigating any further the grooming gang scandal. This from James in Wakefield. You and John Rentoul argue like an old married couple. Thank you for putting him in his place again, as you always do. A couple of other people saying that poor old John Rentoul is a bit delusional. Here we go, defending Starmer and Reeves. Will he ever see the light and smell the coffee that Starmer and his cabinet are massive screw-ups? Well, I think he probably will. And I think in his heart of hearts, he sort of knows that they are massively useless. But, of course, he's hoping that something's going to change and that somebody, somewhere, will do something right. But at the moment, it doesn't really look like it, does it? Let's talk to Dr Ron Daniels, Chief Medical Officer at UK Sepsis Trust, also an NHS intensive care clinician. Dr Ron, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Good to see you. New figures just out. NHS staff experienced the busiest year on record for A&E and ambulance services last year. We heard in one of the stories I read yesterday that some people are waiting as many as 50 hours in A&E to see a doctor. There's problems with a lot of flu cases, 5,407 patients a day in hospital. I spoke to a doctor yesterday and I said, you know, of course we know that winter is always difficult in the NHS. People get sicker, people get more flu and that kind of thing. But he wasn't really able to answer the question I put to him, which was, why is it that we can't seemingly get past this crisis point every single year? Every single year we have the same crisis and the same kind of problems, and we just don't seem to have been able to build up any more capacity. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a broken record, really, isn't it? Yeah. Like every year we hear the word unprecedented demand, right. And you know, it is real. The winters are increasingly busy within the NHS. So the problem is, I think, unless you're in the system, unless you're being harmed by delays and frustrated by delays, it is a bit of white noise in the background. The public know the NHS is busy in the winter. They know that respiratory viruses are more prevalent. So I think, to your question, and I think the leaders in Westminster and in Waterloo know this. It's about flow. It's about the flow of patients through our healthcare system, from the home through to discharge from hospital into intermediary care facilities. And the reality is that we've got patients in hospital who don't need to be in hospital because the social care services are not able to provide for them. The intermediary care facilities are not able to provide for them. The knock-on effect of that, of course, is that we then have patients I need to get out of my intensive care unit who can't go to the ward because there are no beds. The knock-on effect of that is we can't bring new patients in from the emergency department. People can't have their elective surgery. So the system is, in many cases, gridlocked, and we've got to urgently address that.
Right. But again, this is a conversation. But this is a conversation I have every year, and so what I'm saying is, okay, we'll have to get through it again this year, January. But why doesn't somebody organise? I don't know. Just even an emergency committee that would try and improve it for next year. It just doesn't seem to happen.
No, I mean, it would seem a great idea, wouldn't it, that to take this beyond party politics, to take it beyond four-year cycles and actually have a group of senior statespeople who decided on the strategy of delivery of care that the NHS provides. And, I think Norman Lamb has tried to do this in the past. I think others have tried and failed to do this. But we desperately need this. We need to understand that at the moment, care is divided between budgets, between government departments. There's no joined-up thinking about how we deliver care in an holistic way to our public. And that's even ignoring the state of the public health. And what I was going to add to my previous response was, when did it become acceptable that patients sat outside an emergency department, a fully functioning emergency department, in an ambulance, sometimes for many hours without treatment? That's clearly not acceptable, but we've accepted it to be the norm now.
Yeah, well, I guess because people haven't really been given an alternative, although now more and more people are seeing an alternative in private medicine. It may not be for emergencies, obviously, because that's not really possible, but certainly more and more people that I talk to and who you wouldn't possibly expect to have private medicine are getting private health insurance, and they're not waiting for the NHS anymore. So technically speaking, you might think that could ease some of the pressure on some of the parts of the NHS. It's just, I mean, again, I sound like a broken record because I say the same thing every year as well. And it's not about party politics for me either. I don't think politicians should have anything to do with the bloody NHS. I think it should be run by doctors. I don't think it should be run by managers. I think it should be run by the people who know what they require, instead of this kind of wall of what appears to be red tape and complete and utter sort of dogged reliance on, well, we always do it this way, so we can't change it,
Yeah, well, I mean, you sound like a manager, Mike, with that last statement. And I think this is part of the problem. The NHS has, for many years, failed to understand the difference between management and leadership. And during times of stability, it's okay to expand management. It is okay to do what we did last year, but 1% more efficiently. But during times of crisis, which is where we are now, we need strong leadership. And at the moment, that is lacking.
Yes, and so in terms of just the flow, as you call it, from the ambulance into the A&E and out again, I mean, is there a I know this is probably a stupid question, but is there a straightforward way that it could be streamlined, even just in the short term, even just for the rest of January?
Well, I mean, there's a number of options that,
I think we've just lost Dr. Ron. Sorry about that. As soon as you ask for a solution in the NHS, the system falls over. I think it's written into the computer program just like that. Have you got an answer? No. Sorry. Anyway, we'll be back after this.
man who leads our country should be so out of touch with how the people that he is supposed to represent feel. You know, I am rarely really triggered by politicians. You know, I spend all my time listening to their verbiage. But that comment actually really gets me because it is so insulting to voters. It's so insulting to all those children who were abused.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:57. The farmers are out in force up in Oxford, by the way. I've just got a tweet here from Alan Miller from Together saying it's the beginning of yet another campaign. Today in Oxford, our farmers, your food, everyone's future. There's tractors going down the main road there, probably getting in all sorts of tickets for being in parts of the city, because in Oxford you're not allowed to drive anymore, are you? You have to cycle and walk everywhere. Julie Hartley-Brewer's here. Very good morning to you.
Yeah, farmers aren't fair weather protesters like the Just Stop Oil.
No,
this is about their livelihoods.
They'll come out in all weathers.
They'll be coming out
Absolutely.
all weathers, yeah.
I've got a voice note here. Darren on John Rentoul. Go on, Darren.
Mike Darren from Suffolk, great show. I think John Rentoul must be living on a different planet. 22 billion on a carbon capture project that Dale Vince said is useless. 8 billion on GB Energy. 11 billion on overseas climate. I mean, you go on and on and on. The Chagos Islands. It goes on and on. What is he talking about? Why doesn't he know all these things?
Yeah, well, I think he does know them. He just chooses not to utilise that knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, the 9 billion total cost of the Chagos Islands, paid up a lot of it up front.
Right.
The carbon capture. I mean, again, the stuff that
there
this
you go, haven't
government
got any
spends
money.
their money on. But don't worry about your pensioners. I don't know about you. I had the heating on overnight.
Yeah,
I mean, you can't afford to have your heating on overnight. If a lot of pensioners worrying about putting the heating on at all today, I mean, it's just outrageous, the stuff they waste money on. I mean, what I find extraordinary at the moment, wildfires. Oh, BBC, Sky, obsessed.
Yeah.
Barely any mention of the markets in turmoil. Barely any mention of the massive hike in our debt.
Yes.
When this happened to a lesser extent under Liz Truss, they were all over it.
No.
All over it.
And she was crashing the economy. Eventually I got him to admit that she didn't actually crash the economy.
Well, you see the season